Chapter 89. Just as Genshin's light wind sword was halfway through its stab, a golden, vine-like object shot out from the water towards Genshin. When Genshin's light wind sword collided with the golden vine-like object, Genshin's falling posture came to an abrupt halt. His entire body was suspended in the air while the tip of the light wind sword accurately struck the head of the golden, vine-like object. This scene lasted for 2 breaths of time. Suddenly, from the forest beside the stream, another golden vine shot out towards Genshin at an extremely fast speed. Genshin's expression didn't change. Using the light wind sword as a support point, his entire right arm suddenly exerted force, and his body immediately leapt into the air, landing firmly on the side of the stream. As soon as he landed on the side of the stream, Genshin immediately put on his clothes. After putting on his clothes, Genshin raised his head to look at the golden vine that had attacked him. He saw that this golden vine was actually a snake that was only as thick as a wrist. Its entire body was golden in color, and on its body there were several silvery white lines that extended from the head to the tail. The body of the golden snake was extremely long. Just the part that was exposed to the air was at least 5 meters long. But when Genshin noticed the silvery white lines on the golden snake's body, his expression froze for a moment. Then, as if he had thought of something, his expression greatly changed, and he couldn't help but cry out, "Silver-striped golden snake!" Silver-striped golden snake. This was something that Genshin had read about in the Academy's library. The silver-striped golden snake was an extremely rare species of snake. It was known as the emperor of all snakes. Even in the entire Tianyuan continent, the number of silver-striped golden snakes rarely reached 3 digits. The silver-striped golden snake's value didn't lie in its rarity, but in its body. Whether it was its meat or its blood, they were all extremely valuable. This was especially true for the venom that it contained. In the Tianyuan continent, it was a type of venom that was priceless. This was because if this venom was refined, it could even kill a peak heaven saint master. Furthermore, if one wanted to remove this venom, there was no other way other than using the blood essence of the silver-striped golden snake. Once infected by the venom of the silver-striped golden snake, even a radiant saint master would be helpless. Although radiant saint chi had miraculous healing properties and could easily remove many other types of venom, the silver-striped golden snake's venom could only be temporarily suppressed. Furthermore, the silver-striped golden snake's body was completely different from other snakes. The silver-striped golden snake's body was extremely long but very thin. It was said that some silver-striped golden snakes that had reached the 5th rank of magical beasts had bodies that were over 100 meters long, but their thickness was less than a foot long. A Class 6 silver-striped golden snake could freely control the size of its body. At the very least, it could shrink its body to 1 meter or 2. Class 6 golden-striped silver snakes were extremely powerful as well. It was rumored that they could fly in the air and burrow into the ground. Their extremely potent venom was so potent that even Heaven Saint Masters feared them, not daring to touch them so easily. It was recorded in the book that 100 years ago, in the Sacred Empire, a rank 6 silver-striped golden snake slaughtered a royal city with a population of over 10 million people in less than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn. Not a single person was left alive in the entire royal city. Everyone was poisoned to death, and even their corpses were completely corroded by the poison. The only thing left behind was a foul stench of blood that spilled over the entire city. For this matter, the Holy Emperor's empire had sent out over 10 Heaven Saint Masters to kill the silver-striped golden snake. However, the battle had only lasted for half a day. Out of the 10 Heaven Saint Masters, 7 had died. The remaining ones were either heavily injured or poisoned. Not long after the poisoned Heaven Saint Masters had returned, they had all died. This matter had even alarmed the saint rulers of the Holy Emperor's empire. In the end, the saint ruler had personally taken action and engaged in an earth-shaking battle with a silver-striped golden snake. Only then had the silver-striped golden snake been repelled. However, it had only been repelled and not killed. From this, it could be seen just how powerful the silver-striped golden snake was. Recalling the information he had read about the silver-striped golden snake in the Kargath Academy's library, Genshin's gaze was filled with shock and disbelief as he studied the tiny golden snake in front of him. His heart began to beat uncontrollably. No matter what, he had never thought that the silver-striped golden snake, which was extremely rare on the entire Tianyuan continent, would actually be in such a remote area. Moreover, he had encountered it in the outskirts of the magical Beast Mountain Range. Genshin carefully scanned the body of the golden snake that was only as thick as a wrist. In the end, he had no choice but to admit that what he had encountered was indeed a silver-striped golden snake. Crap, why did I encounter this thing? Genshin quickly calmed down, but he couldn't help but curse in his heart. Although he had never seen a silver-striped golden snake with his own eyes, the information he had read in books was more than enough for him to understand. With his current strength as a great saint, encountering a silver-striped golden snake would undoubtedly be a very troublesome matter. Genshin's gaze became serious as he stared at the silver-striped golden snake that was only a dozen meters away from him. His eyes were filled with vigilance as he gripped the light wind sword tightly. He knew that the silver-striped golden snake he had encountered was not an ordinary magical beast. If he made a mistake, his life could very well end here. This was definitely the most dangerous situation he had encountered since entering the Devil Beast Mountain Range. It was so dangerous that Genshin didn't even have the confidence to make it out alive. If he had encountered other powerful magical beasts, Genshin wouldn't have been able to defeat them. At least he would have had the opportunity to escape. But ever since he had recognized the silver-striped golden snake, he had already given up on the idea of running away. Although his speed was extremely fast, to the point where he could surpass a Saint Master with a wind attribute, when facing a silver-striped golden snake, Genshin knew that with his speed he wouldn't even be able to carry its shoes. This was because the silver-striped golden snake's speed in a straight line was extremely fast. Although it wasn't the fastest magical beast out of all the magical beasts on land, the silver-striped golden snake's speed in a straight line was definitely in the top 3. Among humans, unless they had the wind attribute Saint Force and were stronger than the silver-striped golden snake by several levels, they wouldn't be able to catch up to it. If I encounter a silver-striped golden snake, I definitely can't run in a straight line. Otherwise, only death awaits me. I just don't know how strong this silver-striped golden snake is. If it's a Class 1 magical beast, then the threat it poses to me would be a lot smaller, and I might even be able to kill it. If it's a Class 2 magical beast, then even if it poses a threat to me, it shouldn't be a problem for me to escape from it. Genshin thought to himself. Right now, he could only hope that the silver-striped golden snake in front of him wasn't too strong. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for him to leave this place alive. Genshin took less than a breath's time to think. At this moment, the silver-striped golden snake suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a gray, poisonous mist. It quickly floated towards Genshin. Just as the poisonous mist appeared, all the plants in a 10-meter radius immediately withered. Even some of the thick branches were changing at a visible rate, their life force quickly draining away. Just as the gray mist appeared, Genshin actually felt a wave of dizziness. At the same time, Genshin's body also felt a wave of weakness. Feeling the changes in his body, Genshin's eyes flashed with a trace of shock. The silver-striped golden snake's poisonous mist could actually spread through the air, directly polluting the air. Now, Genshin finally experienced the terror of the silver-striped golden snake's poison. No wonder this poison could easily kill a Heaven Saint Master. Without any hesitation, Genshin immediately bit the tip of his tongue. The heart-wrenching pain from the tip of his tongue finally cleared his dizzy mind. Following that, he quickly retreated and circulated the saint force in his body. Only, like this did the feeling of weakness in his body gradually recede. After regaining his composure, Genshin's expression had already become heavy. Although he had not fought with the silver-striped golden snake, from the poisonous mist it had spat out, he could already estimate that the silver-striped golden snake's strength was at least at the second step. Seeing the poisonous mist quickly float towards him, Genshin did not hesitate at all. He immediately held his breath and lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. His body gracefully shot into the distance. Just as Genshin moved, the silver-striped golden snake's body also moved. It turned into a golden streak of light and chased after Genshin at a speed several times faster than Genshin's. Although the silver-striped golden snake's body was only as thick as a person's wrist, its speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had already caught up to Genshin and opened its mouth wide to bite at Genshin's neck. Just as the silver-striped golden snake's mouth was about to bite down on Genshin's neck, Genshin suddenly lowered his body and dodged the attack by a hair's breadth. At the same time, he turned around and stabbed the light wind sword in his right hand towards the silver-striped golden snake's neck. On the blade of the light wind sword, there was a layer of hazy white light. At the tip of the sword, a large amount of sword chi gathered together to form a dazzling white light. This was the full strength of Genshin's sword. The light wind sword was able to pierce through the silver-striped golden snake's body without any hindrance. However, Genshin's face didn't reveal the slightest trace of happiness. Instead, his expression became extremely ugly. This was because the light wind sword hadn't managed to pierce through the silver-striped golden snake skin. It hadn't even left a single mark. What a strong defense! Genshin sucked in a breath of cold air, and his face had already become a bit paler. Because of the special cultivation method he cultivated, his attack power was already very strong. Although he only had the strength of a great saint, his attack power wasn't much weaker than a saint master's at all. However, his full strength strike actually didn't leave the slightest mark on the golden silver-striped snake's vital points. Now, Genshin had already realized that the golden silver-striped snake in front of him was at least a Class 3 magical beast, or even a Class 4 magical beast. It was simply not something he could fight against. Chapter 90. While Genshin was still in a daze, the silver-striped golden snake's small head opened its mouth and bit towards Genshin's neck once again. Its sharp teeth were covered in a grayish-white liquid. Realizing that the silver-striped gold snake was about to bite him, Genshin immediately moved his head to the side, dodging the silver-striped gold snake's jaws. He then circled around to the back of the silver-striped gold snake. With the light wind sword in his hand, he once again stabbed towards the silver-striped gold snake's weak point. The light wind sword accurately pierced the silver-striped golden snake's weak point, but when the tip of the sword came into contact with the silver-striped golden snake skin, it was unable to go any further. This thin layer of golden skin was like an indestructible fortress, preventing Genshin's full strength attack from leaving a single mark on the snake's body. Seeing this, Genshin's expression became even more grim. His mood had also completely sunk after seeing the effects of his attack. The silver-striped gold snake's powerful defense was something that Genshin could do nothing about. His powerful attack was like a child scratching an itch in front of the silver-striped gold snake's powerful defense. It couldn't do any damage to the snake at all. Without any hesitation, Genshin immediately withdrew his light wind sword and kicked off the ground. Before the silver-striped golden snake could even react, his body was already high up in the air. After confirming his direction, he used the tree branches as leverage to fly towards the depths of the magical beast mountain range. The silver-striped golden snake's strong defense made it impossible for Genshin to kill it. Therefore, Gentian could only fly towards the depths of the magical beast mountain range in hopes of encountering a powerful magical beast that could tie down the silver-striped golden snake. Only then would he be able to smoothly escape, although this would be very dangerous. Other than that, Gentian had no other choice. Although Gentian knew that there would be quite a few mercenaries entering the mountain range of magical beasts, and that he might be able to borrow their strength to delay the silver-striped gold snake, the mountain range of magical beasts was just too large. Even if he wanted to meet some mercenaries here, it would be an extremely difficult matter. Gentian's body was in the air. Using the tree branches as leverage, he quickly flew towards the depths of the magical beast mountain range. Behind him, the silver-striped golden snake, which was only as thick as a wrist, was relentlessly chasing after him. Its almond tongue was constantly swallowing, and its body was at least 6 to 7 meters long. The silver-striped golden snake's body was very long, completely disproportionate to its size. At the very least, Gentian had not been able to clearly see the silver-striped golden snake's entire body. But according to his estimates, the silver-striped golden snake in front of him was at least 50 meters long. Gentian's flight path maintained and shape. Along the way, he did his best to choose a direction with obstacles to block the silver-striped golden snake's pursuit. Roar! Suddenly, a tiger's roar came from not too far away. The sound rapidly approached Gentian. Not long after, a 3-meter-long black tiger appeared in Gentian's line of sight. Its eyes were filled with an ominous glint as it stared at Gentian. However, just as the black tiger was about to pounce on Gentian, a small golden snake, only as thick as a wrist and 6 to 7 meters long, appeared in front of the black tiger's eyes. When the black tiger saw the small golden snake, it was as if it had been struck by lightning. The hairs on its body stood on end, and the originally ominous glint in its eyes shrunk in an instant. It looked at the silver-striped golden snake with eyes full of fear. Afterwards, it didn't dare to stay here for even a moment longer, and immediately fled with its tail between its legs. Although the silver-striped golden snake was a snake, there were very few magical beasts that dared to offend it, even if they were placed in a group of magical beasts. This situation occurred many times in the mountain range of magical beasts. Along the way, Gentian also encountered quite a few magical beasts. However, when these magical beasts saw the silver-striped golden snake following closely behind him, they were immediately scared to the point of pissing their pants. They didn't even dare to make a sound as they fled with their tails between their legs. Not a single magical beast dared to provoke the silver-striped golden snake that was only as thick as a wrist. After an hour, Gentian had already neared the depths of the mountain range of magical beasts. The forest here was becoming more and more luxuriant, causing Gentian's advance to be greatly obstructed. Behind him, the silver-striped golden snake was still in hot pursuit. It seemed to have already recognized Gentian. Even though they encountered quite a few magical beasts along the way, it continued to pursue Gentian without letting go. SSS. The silver-striped golden snake's head turned into a blur as it once again bit towards Gentian. Gentian was constantly paying attention to the situation behind him. His 2 legs immediately kicked off the trunk of a nearby tree, and his entire body shot to the side, dodging the silver-striped golden snake's attack. Seeing Gentian dodge its attack time and time again, the silver-striped golden snake seemed to be enraged. Its pair of small eyes flashed with a dangerous light, and a long golden tail stretched out from the grass, whipping towards Gentian at an extremely fast speed. Gentian's face slightly changed. At this time, there was a thick tree right next to him. Gentian did not hesitate and kicked off the tree again, his entire body shooting towards a nearby tree with dense foliage. The silver-striped golden snake's long and thin tail also followed Gentian's movements, and with a speed even faster than Gentian's, it caught up to Gentian in the blink of an eye, and then wrapped its long and thin tail around Gentian's waist. With the snake's tail wrapped around his waist, Genshin turned pale with fright. The light wind sword in his hand suddenly glowed with a silver light, and he immediately stabbed towards the snake's tail. However, the silver-striped golden snake's outer layer of skin was very strong, and Genshin's sword didn't even leave a mark on it. At this time, a disgusting smell assaulted his nostrils. The silver-striped golden snake's mouth was open wider than its body, and like a bolt of lightning, it bit towards Genshin's neck. In an instant, it had arrived at Genshin's neck. Genshin was shocked. Without any time to prepare, he immediately stabbed towards the silver-striped golden snake's mouth with his light wind sword. However, the silver-striped golden snake was very cunning. It nimbly turned its head, dodging Genshin's light wind sword, and then bit Genshin's left shoulder. Those sharp teeth pierced deeply into Genshin's left shoulder. Feeling the pain from his left shoulder, Genshin's face immediately turned pale. The silver-striped golden snake's poison was very strong. Once bitten, the only antidote was the silver-striped golden snake's blood essence. Apart from that, there was no other way. Even Saint Chi was unable to neutralize this poison. Furthermore, the silver-striped golden snake's skin was very strong. With Genshin's strength, he wouldn't even be able to leave a mark on its skin, let alone extract its blood essence. Seeing the silver-striped golden snake biting down on his left shoulder, Genshin's eyes suddenly became crazed. Affected by his emotions, Genshin's spirit became more active than ever. Faintly, Genshin's mind seemed to be filled with images of his surroundings. However, this feeling was very faint, so faint that if Genshin didn't pay attention to it, he wouldn't be able to sense it. But in his current state of agitation, he didn't notice it at all. Genshin let out a roar towards the sky. He didn't care if he could break through the silver-striped golden snake's defense. Raising the light wind sword in his hand, he slashed towards the silver-striped golden snake's head. In the instant that the light wind sword slashed out, Genshin's spirit seemed to connect with the light wind sword in his hand. It was as if the two had completely merged into one. At this moment, a strange feeling suddenly appeared in Genshin's heart. It was as if his spirit was the sword, and the sword was his spirit. At the same time, in Genshin's dantian, the purple and green spots of light began to flicker. A faint purple and green light emitted from the two spots of light. Without Genshin noticing, the purple and green light slowly spread out into his brain. The light wind sword in Genshin's hand let out a soft hum. Immediately after, a powerful and swift sword chi was emitted from the light wind sword, completely enveloping the light wind sword. At this moment, it looked as if the light wind sword was surrounded by a thick fog. The sword itself was blurry and difficult to see clearly. Ding! The light wind sword fiercely chopped down on the silver-striped golden snake's head. This time, the light wind sword's powerful and sharp sword chi easily cut through the silver-striped golden snake's extremely tough skin. Immediately, a deep wound appeared on the silver-striped golden snake's head. Bright red blood began to flow out from the wound. Hiss! The silver-striped golden snake cried out in pain. The huge mouth that was biting onto Genshin's shoulder suddenly loosened. The snake's head moved away from Genshin as it stared at Genshin with its small eyes. Seeing the bloody wound on the silver-striped golden snake's head, Genshin's face froze for a moment before revealing an expression of ecstasy. To think that I was able to break through the silver-striped golden snake's defense. Genshin's heart was filled with both joy and surprise. Under his careful control, his spirit and the light wind sword became tightly connected. At this moment, the feeling of his spirit and the light wind sword becoming spirit became even clearer in Genshin's heart. It was as if the light wind sword was his life, his soul. As the connection between Genshin's spirit and the light wind sword deepened, the sword chi on the light wind sword became even more powerful. It was as if this powerful sword chi was completely reliant on Genshin's spirit. Without thinking too much about this mysterious feeling, Genshin let go of the light wind sword in his right hand. The light wind sword that was enveloped by the sword chi did not fall down. Instead, it strangely floated in the air and slowly rose up. Finally, it stopped 3 feet away from Genshin's nose. The tip of the light wind sword was pointed directly at the silver-striped golden snake. Hum! A long and clear sound came from the light wind sword. Chapter 91. The silver-striped golden snake cautiously stared at the light wind sword floating in the air. Its tongue continuously flickered in and out of its mouth. The light wind sword's powerful sword chi made the silver-striped golden snake feel a sense of danger, so it didn't dare to recklessly attack. Genshin slowly closed his eyes and carefully felt the strange feeling of controlling the light wind sword. Then, with a thought, Genshin controlled the light wind sword to become a silver bolt of lightning. Without anyone controlling it, it shot towards the silver-striped golden snake at an unbelievable speed. So, the long sword pierced through the air, bringing with it an ear-piercing screech as it pierced towards the silver-striped golden snake's head. Before the silver-striped golden snake could even react, the light wind sword had already pierced through its head. Immediately, a deep wound appeared on the silver-striped golden snake's head. Bright red blood flowed out from the wound, dyeing the snake's head red. Genshin was still tied up by the silver-striped golden snake's tail, but when he saw the wound on its head caused by the light wind sword, his eyes lit up with joy. Since he was able to break through its defense, didn't that mean that Genshin had a chance of killing the silver-striped golden snake today? Immediately, Genshin used the divine sword technique again to control the light wind sword to continuously attack the silver-striped golden snake. So, under Genshin's control, the light wind sword became a silver bolt of lightning that pierced towards the silver-striped golden snake again and again. However, this time, the light wind sword was attacking the silver-striped golden snake's weak point. A silver-white light flashed in front of the silver-striped golden snake's body, leaving behind a deep wound. Although the wound wasn't shallow, it clearly didn't injure any of the silver-striped golden snake's vital points. A snake's heart was located at the 7th inch of the snake's body. Although the light wind sword had pierced through the silver-striped golden snake's skin, under the powerful defense of the snake's skin, the light wind sword had not been able to penetrate the snake's heart. Being attacked at its weak point, the silver-striped golden snake began to panic. It immediately lowered its body to the ground and formed a circle around its weak point to protect it. At the same time, the tail that was wrapped around Genshin's waist also loosened. Without the snake's tail binding him, Genshin's body fell from the sky and landed on the ground. As soon as he landed, a strong sense of dizziness attacked Genshin's mind, but it was quickly suppressed by Genshin's powerful divine sword technique. Using his right hand to support himself, Genshin crawled up from the ground with some difficulty. Looking at his completely numb left arm and his body, Genshin's expression changed slightly. He suddenly exerted force with his right hand and tore off his clothes. Genshin's entire left arm and the left side of his chest had turned completely black, and it was spreading through his entire body at a visible rate. What a strong poison! Genshin's expression suddenly sank. From the time he had been bitten by the silver-striped golden snake until now, it had only been 2 breaths of time. But in this short period of time, the poison had already spread to half of his body. Such a fast-spreading speed made Genshin's heart jump. Moreover, the most frightening thing was that Saint Force was unable to suppress the spread of the poison. Thinking about how the light Saint Force could suppress the spread of the poison, Genshin didn't hesitate to multitask. On one hand, he controlled the light wind sword to hold back the silver-striped golden snake, preventing it from continuing to attack him. On the other hand, he controlled the light Saint Force to quickly gather around him. Under Genshin's full control, the Saint Force in the air gathered towards Genshin at a frightening speed. When the Saint Force had gathered to a certain degree, a layer of hazy white light appeared around Genshin's body. Furthermore, it was rapidly becoming stronger. In just a few breaths of time, the hazy white light from before had completely turned into a milky white light. It enveloped Genshin's entire body, making him look like a white cocoon. Although the light was strong, it was not dazzling to the eyes. As the radiant Saint Force continued to pour into Genshin's body, the poison that was rapidly spreading through his body finally came to a stop. The speed of its spread suddenly slowed down, but that was all. Although the radiant Saint Force had miraculous effects on healing and could easily remove most poisons in the world, the radiant Saint Force could only temporarily suppress the poison of the golden-striped silver snake. On the other side, the light wind sword had turned into a silver-white light and was constantly revolving around the silver-striped golden snake's body. The snake's small eyes were constantly flickering with light as it cautiously looked at the light wind sword that was constantly moving through the air. The silver-striped golden snake had already used its long body to protect its 7 inches of injury. Right now, the silver-striped golden snake was aware that its life was in danger. So, after the light wind sword had circled around the silver-striped golden snake a few times, it let out a sharp whistling sound as it pierced towards the snake's head once again. The light wind sword's speed was simply too fast. Under Genshin's control, its speed was several times faster than when Genshin was using his hands. Before the silver-striped golden snake could even react, the light wind sword had already pierced through its head. Hiss! The silver-striped gold snake let out a hoarse hiss in pain. Its tongue continuously flickered in and out of its mouth. Finally, it opened its mouth wide, and a thick, gray, poisonous fog continuously sprayed out from its mouth. Very quickly, it enveloped an area of a few meters. Instantly, the surrounding plants withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even some of the towering trees with extremely strong vitality were unable to resist this strong poison. Their entire trunks quickly withered, and the lush leaves on the trees turned a withered yellow as if it was autumn, falling down from the branches and leaves one after another. The poison fog spread through the air and continued to spread in all directions. Wherever the poison fog passed, the originally lush forest that was filled with life immediately withered. As soon as the poisonous fog appeared, Genshin immediately stopped breathing as his body was enveloped in a milky white light. The silver-striped golden snake's poison was extremely powerful. Even Saint Force was unable to neutralize it. Thus, Genshin was extremely wary of the poisonous fog. Using the poisonous fog as cover, the silver-striped golden snake did not continue to stay in the area and immediately fled. The light wind sword's speed was so fast that it was unable to catch up to it. This had already caused the infamous silver-striped golden snake to feel fear. In a situation where its life was in danger, the silver-striped golden snake had already given up on chasing after Genshin. Seeing that the silver-striped golden snake was about to escape, Genshin's eyes revealed a trace of anxiousness. Without any hesitation, he controlled the light wind sword to chase after it. Now that he had been poisoned by the silver-striped golden snake's venom, he needed the snake's blood to neutralize it. Otherwise, even if Genshin could use his Radiant Saint Force to suppress the spread of the venom, he would still die without a doubt. This was because the Radiant Saint Force could only suppress the venom temporarily and could not last long. Furthermore, maintaining the Radiant Saint Force consumed a great deal of energy, so Genshin could not maintain it for long. The light wind sword turned into a streak of silver light and flashed through the forest like a bolt of lightning. In an instant, it had caught up to the silver-striped golden snake and viciously stabbed into its heart. Faced with the light wind sword's speed, the silver-striped golden snake had no time to dodge and was viciously stabbed into its heart. Just as the light wind sword pierced through the silver-striped golden snake's heart, The silver-striped golden snake's body suddenly trembled, and its momentum came to an abrupt halt. Soon after, it let out a mournful cry, and its entire body fell to the ground. Phew! Gentian let out a long sigh of relief. His heart, that was in his throat, finally calmed down. His little life was finally saved. The light wind sword let out a sword cry as the tip of the sword separated from the silver-striped golden snake's heart. After circling twice in the air, it turned into a streak of light and flew back to Gentian. Finally, it returned to Gentian's hand. Looking at the light wind sword in his hand, Gentian forcefully suppressed the joy in his heart and quickly walked towards the silver-striped golden snake's body. Right now, he needed to immediately absorb the snake's blood to detoxify the poison. Otherwise, in this magic Beast Mountain range, every second he wasted would mean more danger. His footsteps were a little shaky as he walked for about 50 meters. Finally, Gentian arrived in front of the silver-striped golden snake. Looking at the silver-striped golden snake's body that was still unknown to him, Gentian did not hesitate and immediately squatted down on the ground. With both hands, he lifted the silver-striped golden snake's blood-soaked body to his mouth and began to viciously suck on the blood. Gudon! Gudon! Gentian's throat continued to move as he swallowed mouthfuls of the silver-striped golden snake's blood. As the blood slowly flowed down his throat and into his stomach, Gentian could clearly feel that within the silver-striped golden snake's blood, there was a very special energy that flowed through his body. Whenever the blood came into contact with the poison would quickly dissipate, as if it was being assimilated. Chapter 92. Only when his stomach was filled to the brim with the silver-striped golden snake's blood did Gentian finally stop absorbing the snake's blood. Ah! Gentian raised his head and opened his mouth to let out a sound of pleasure. He then began to pant slightly. Within Gentian's body, the large amount of silver-striped golden snake's blood had accumulated in his stomach. In the end, it was assimilated by Gentian's blood at an extremely slow rate and was absorbed by his body. At the same time, the poison on the left side of his chest and his entire left arm was rapidly fading away at a visible rate. The jet-black color of his skin gradually returned to normal. Although the silver-striped golden snake's poison was incomparably potent and could only be neutralized by its blood, this type of poison was removed extremely quickly. Not long after, the poison in Gentian's body was completely removed. Aside from the 2 small teeth marks that still remained on his shoulder, the color of his left arm and chest had completely returned to normal. Phew! Looking at his body that had completely returned to normal, Gentian let out a long sigh of relief. He rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, he had successfully killed the silver-striped golden snake at the very last moment. Otherwise, even with the Radiant Saint Force suppressing the spread of the poison, he definitely wouldn't have been able to live for more than 3 days. After all, he couldn't maintain the Radiant Saint Force for too long. This was extremely taxing on his spirit. Slowly standing up from the ground, Gentian sized up the silver-striped golden snake that had fallen to the ground like a golden vine. He felt a burst of excitement in his heart. In the entire Tianyuan continent, the number of silver-striped golden snakes that appeared did not exceed 3 digits. They could be said to be extremely rare. Moreover, the value of the silver-striped golden snake itself was extremely high. Without any exaggeration, although the silver-striped golden snake was extremely poisonous, its entire body was a treasure. It was said that eating the flesh of the silver-striped golden snake would not only increase one's resistance to various poisons, it would also strengthen one's body. Although it would not be as monstrous as the silver-striped golden snake's defense, it would still increase by quite a bit. As for the silver-striped golden snake's gallbladder, it was said to be an extremely high-grade medicinal ingredient. If it was combined with the essence blood of the silver-striped golden snake and refined using a special method, it would be possible to cultivate an impenetrable body, making one immune to all poisons in the world. Unless the poison was stronger than the silver-striped golden snake's gallbladder or other poisons on par with the silver-striped golden snake's gallbladder. None of the poisons in the world would be able to pose the slightest threat to a person with the impenetrable body. As for the silver-striped golden snake's venomous fangs, it was also a weapon with extremely terrifying killing power. Because it grew up in the silver-striped golden snake's mouth and was continuously soaked in the venom day and night, the silver-striped golden snake's teeth had slowly undergone a transformation. Now, the silver-striped golden snake's teeth had long been contaminated with a poison that could never be removed. Once it was injured by the venomous fangs, it would be the silver-striped golden snake's venom. Without the silver-striped golden snake's blood to detoxify the venom, the only result would be death. This venom was something that even Heaven Saint Masters could do nothing about. Of course, with the current venom of the silver-striped golden snake, it was impossible for it to kill a Heaven Saint Master in a short amount of time. However, it could make it so that the Heaven Saint Master would never be able to get rid of the venom. In the end, they would still die. The only antidote was the silver-striped golden snake's blood. Although the venom of the silver-striped golden snake was extremely potent, the strength of the venom was still related to the snake's strength. The stronger the snake, the more potent the venom. Once the silver-striped golden snake reached Class 6, it would definitely be able to poison a Heaven Saint Master to death in a short amount of time. The skin of the silver-striped golden snake was not only soft, but also extremely tough. It was an excellent material for making inner armor, so it was extremely valuable. As for the venom sac of the silver-striped golden snake, it was the type that was priceless on the market. This venom sac could be refined into a colorless and odorless venom using a special method. This venom could avoid detection by poison detection tools, making it difficult for people to detect. Under this venom, even Heaven Saint Masters would not be able to escape. Furthermore, the only antidote was the silver-striped golden snake's blood. On the Tianyuan continent, the venom sac of the silver-striped golden snake had appeared in a few auctions. However, every time it appeared, it would be bought by a few people with special motives at an astronomical price. Silently recalling the information regarding the silver-striped golden snake that he had read in books, Genshin's mood also surged along with the information in his mind. He was unable to suppress his excitement. This time it was definitely his greatest gain since entering the magical Beast Mountain range. In particular, the impenetrable poison body was something that even Genshin was moved by. Without the slightest hesitation, Genshin immediately began to drag the silver-striped golden snake's slender body. Regarding the corpse of the silver-striped golden snake, Genshin would definitely not leave it there like a normal magical beast. After expending some effort, Genshin finally pulled the silver-striped golden snake's body out of the weeds and piled it together. Only now did Genshin clearly see the length of the silver-striped golden snake's body. It was actually over 70 meters long. The strength of a silver-striped golden snake was determined by the length of its body. Starting from the 20-meter-long body of a Class 1 silver-striped golden snake, with every increase in strength, the snake's body would grow by 20 meters, all the way up to 100 meters at Class 5. As for the Class 6 silver-striped golden snake, it was already able to freely change the size of its body. So for Class 6 silver-striped golden snakes and above, their strength could no longer be determined by their body. As for the silver-striped golden snake in front of him, from the length of its body, it was obvious that it was a powerful magical beast that was about to break through to Class 4. Genshin took out the spatial ring that had always been hanging on his body from his chest. This spatial ring had been given to him by his father, Changyang when he left Changyang Prefecture. The space inside was extremely large, far from what a spatial belt could compare to. And if he wanted to take away this 70-meter-long silver-striped golden snake, the only way was to use this spatial ring. This was because the narrow space of the spatial belt was simply unable to contain the silver-striped golden snake's body. However, if he wanted to put the 70-meter-long silver-striped golden snake into the spatial ring. It wouldn't be an easy task. Just as Genshin was about to make his move, his expression suddenly changed slightly, and he abruptly turned his head to look behind him. He saw that in the direction of Genshin's gaze, several figures had parted the thicket and were walking out. And just as Genshin's gaze was looking at them, those figures also discovered Genshin's existence at the same time. Shit! Genshin's expression changed slightly and he cursed in his heart. He was afraid that more trouble was about to occur. There were a total of 20 or so people, and judging from their attire, they were a group of mercenaries. When these mercenaries discovered Genshin, their expressions all froze. Meeting a person here had clearly brought them some surprise. But soon after, their gazes were attracted by the silver-striped golden snake that was coiled around Genshin. Walking at the very front of the group of mercenaries was a middle-aged man who looked to be around 40 years old. When the middle-aged man's gaze fell on the silver-striped golden snake, his brows couldn't help but slightly wrinkle, and he revealed a pondering expression. Then, as if he had thought of something, a light flashed in his eyes, and an enormous sense of joy and disbelief instantly covered his entire face. His gaze was even more fervent and filled with disbelief as he stared unwaveringly at the silver-striped golden snake behind Genshin. He couldn't help but cry out in surprise, "Silver-striped golden snake? It's actually a silver-striped golden snake." The middle-aged man's words caused the group of mercenaries behind him to be stunned, as if they hadn't reacted to what kind of magical beast the silver-striped golden snake was. But soon after, when the information regarding the silver-striped golden snake surfaced in their minds, each and every one of their expressions changed greatly. Their gazes were filled with surprise, fervor, and other complicated emotions as they all looked at the silver-striped golden snake that was only as thick as a wrist behind Genshin. After carefully sizing it up, more and more cries of surprise that were difficult to suppress came from their mouths. Could it be that this is a silver-striped golden snake? This really is a silver-striped golden snake, just like in the legends. I never thought that we would actually encounter a silver-striped golden snake here. We're going to be rich. All kinds of cries of surprise came from the mouths of the group of mercenaries. Each and every one of them looked at the silver-striped golden snake with a fervent gaze. Their faces were filled with undisguised greed. Genshin secretly sighed in his heart. He never thought that at such a crucial time, such an unforeseen event would occur. This was definitely the situation that he didn't want to see the most, but unfortunately, the heavens didn't let him have his way. Quickly putting away the interspatial ring, the silver-white light wind sword appeared in Genshin's hand. Without the slightest hesitation, Genshin's body turned into a white blur as he rushed towards the group of mercenaries in front of him. The other party had already recognized the silver-striped golden snake. With how precious the silver-striped golden snake was, there was no need to think too much about it. Genshin was very clear in his heart that the other party would use any means necessary to snatch it away. There was simply no room for negotiation. Genshin's speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already crossed a distance of 30 meters and arrived in front of the group of mercenaries. The light wind sword in his hand pierced towards them. Good timing. The middle-aged man, who was the leader of the group, was not weak. He quickly recovered from the surprise of seeing the silver-striped golden snake and coldly snorted as he stared at Genshin. Suddenly, a large sword appeared in his hand as he raised it and slashed towards Genshin. Chapter 93. Facing Genshin's lightning-like speed, only a few of the mercenaries were able to react. Their saint weapons appeared in their hands, and they immediately slashed at Genshin. Genshin didn't want to get tangled up with them. His body slightly swayed, dodging their attacks and quickly passing by them. The light wind sword in his hand was like a flash of silver as it pierced through the necks of two of them. When the silver light disappeared, the two people's bodies immediately stiffened. As the light in their eyes quickly faded, their eyes gradually became dull. On their throats, a small blood wound appeared in everyone's line of sight. In the next moment, bright red blood surged out from the wound on their throats. The two people's bodies also slowly fell to the ground. His speed didn't decrease in the slightest as he passed by the two mercenaries. In the blink of an eye, Jianchen had rushed to the back of the group of mercenaries. The weaker mercenaries became Jianchen's primary targets. Although there were 20 or so mercenaries, they weren't very strong. Most of them were either saints or great saints. Only the middle-aged man in the lead and another person had the strength of a saint master. Jianchen's feet moved in a mysterious manner, and his body was like a ghost. He quickly flashed behind the mercenaries, and as the silver light continued to flash, more and more mercenaries fell under Jianchen's light wind sword. These saint-level mercenaries were completely powerless in front of Jianchen. Facing such an extremely fast attack, their brains didn't even have time to react, let alone defend. In less than a breath's time, the saint-level mercenaries died one after another under Jianchen's sword. As for the remaining mercenaries, even the weakest of them had the strength of a great saint. Facing Jianchen's attacks, they already had the strength to resist. After killing the weakest saint, Jianchen's movements didn't stop at all. The light wind sword in his hand once again turned into a bolt of silver lightning as it pierced towards a nearby great saint mercenary. Facing this extremely fast attack, the mercenary's face turned pale. It was already too late to dodge. In a moment of desperation, he could only use the axe in his hand to block in front of him. However, the light wind sword in Jianchen's hand was like a venomous snake. Changing the direction of the sword, the light wind sword that was originally aimed at the mercenary's throat suddenly changed direction and pierced towards his heart. Pooh! This time, the great saint didn't even have time to react before the silvery white light wind sword pierced through his left chest, piercing through his heart. Just as the light wind sword pierced the mercenary's heart, Jianchen immediately pulled it out and continued to attack the rest of the mercenaries. Seeing that several of their brothers had died in such a short period of time, the remaining mercenaries were all shocked and furious. "Bastard, go to hell! Give me back my brother's life." The remaining great saint mercenaries all shouted as they raised their saint weapons and attacked Jianchen from different directions, sealing off all of Jianchen's escape routes. The corners of Jianchen's mouth curled up into a sneer as the light wind sword emitted a hazy glow. With lightning speed, he stabbed towards the incoming saint weapon. Ding! 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 In a short moment, Jianchen had already pierced out with his sword several times, each time accurately hitting a saint weapon. When the light wind sword collided with the saint weapons of the opposing mercenaries, the sound of metal colliding rang out. It was as if there was only one sound, and it was difficult to tell the difference between the two. The moment the light wind sword collided with the saint weapons, a powerful force flowed through the light wind sword and into the opposing saint weapons. Sensing the powerful force from the saint weapon, the expressions of several great saint mercenaries changed. Then they couldn't help but stagger backwards. None of them would have thought that the light wind sword in front of them, which was only 2 fingers thick, would contain a force that was completely different from its size. Jianchen's eyes flashed with killing intent as he took advantage of the fact that the mercenaries were still unable to regain control of their bodies. Like a ghost, Jianchen silently appeared in front of one of the mercenaries. The light wind sword in his hand was covered with a layer of sword chi as it pierced towards the mercenary's neck with lightning speed. Facing such an extremely fast attack, the mercenary who had not yet stabilized himself had no time to react. In the end, under his terrified eyes, the light wind sword had already pierced through his throat, and the bloody tip of the light wind sword came out from the other end of the mercenary's throat. At that moment, a large sword came from behind Jianchen. Jianchen's eyes flashed as he pulled out the light wind sword from the mercenary's throat. Turning around, the light-wind sword in his hand was covered in a layer of hazy sword light. Like a bolt of silver lightning, he stabbed backwards at an extremely fast speed. Dang! The light-wind sword, which was only 2 fingers thick, collided with a 3-inch wide greatsword in midair. The 2 saint weapons, which were completely different in size, were actually evenly matched. However, no one noticed that when the light-wind sword and the great sword collided, Genshin's right arm, which was holding onto the light-wind sword, trembled slightly. Turning his gaze, Genshin coldly stared at the owner of the great sword. He saw that the owner of the great sword was the middle-aged man who had been walking at the front of the group of mercenaries. But at this time, the middle-aged man's face was extremely gloomy as he looked at Genshin with eyes filled with killing intent. The middle-aged man's eyes flashed with killing intent as he let out a shout. His left hand formed into a fist as he punched towards Genshin's face. Genshin's eyes flashed with a cold light as the corners of his mouth curled up into a sneer. Facing the middle-aged man's punch, Genshin did not dodge. Instead, his left hand formed a palm and fearlessly met the middle-aged man's fist. Pow! When the fist and palm collided, the powerful force contained within erupted, emitting a muffled sound. At the point where the 2 palms collided, a powerful force shot out and spread in all directions. Under the devastation of this invisible force, the surrounding weeds and trees began to sway. Some of the weeds that were closer to the 2 of them were pressed down to the point where they bent over and fell to the ground. As for Genshin and the middle-aged man, they were both pushed back by the force of the collision. In the end, they stood facing each other with a distance of 10 meters between them. The middle-aged man's face was gloomy as he stared at Genshin with eyes filled with killing intent. He said in a deep voice, "Brat, your movements are really fast. Your attacks are really ruthless." At this time, the remaining great saints gathered behind the middle-aged man and looked at Genshin with eyes filled with shock and anger. Genshin coldly stared at the group of mercenaries, but he didn't say anything. Now that they had discovered the silver-striped golden snake, Genshin had no choice but to silence them. With the experience of his past life, Genshin was not a greenhorn. He knew very well that once the matter of the silver-striped golden snake was spread, it would definitely bring him endless trouble. After all, the silver-striped golden snake was just too precious. It was so precious that some of the major powers of the Tianyuan continent would not hesitate to go to war in order to obtain it. Once he was hunted down by them, it would definitely be more miserable than being hunted down by the Huayan sect. Genshin definitely did not want to see such a situation. Therefore, taking advantage of this opportunity, Genshin had to kill everyone present to completely prevent the information about the silver-striped golden snake from spreading. The group of mercenaries only had 11 people left. Aside from the middle-aged man who had the strength of a Saint Master, there was another 30-year-old youth who also had the strength of a Saint Master. In this group, only these 2 people could pose a threat to Genshin. Seeing that Genshin was not speaking, the middle-aged man was disinclined to say anything else and loudly ordered, "Brothers, everyone attack together. Not only will we be able to avenge our fallen brothers, but we will also be able to obtain the silver-striped golden snake. Once we obtain the silver-striped golden snake, we will no longer have to risk our lives to hunt magical beasts in the magical Beast Mountain range just to earn some money." After saying that, the middle-aged man took the lead and rushed towards Genshin. Behind him, the great Saint Master mercenaries also followed closely behind. Genshin did not say anything, but the battle intent in his heart had unknowingly soared. Immediately after, he raised his light-wind sword and quickly rushed towards the group of mercenaries. Seeing Genshin rushing towards him, the middle-aged man's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent. Immediately after, he raised his large sword and slashed towards Genshin's head. Genshin's face revealed a cold smile. He did not come into contact with the middle-aged man. Immediately after, He changed his pace and went around the middle-aged man's large sword, rushing towards the group of mercenaries who were much weaker than him. Towards this move of Genshin's, the middle-aged man was clearly on guard since he had suffered a loss before. Suddenly, he changed the direction of his large sword and used brute force to forcefully change the direction of his attack. Afterwards, the large sword followed Genshin's figure as he passed by him. It continued to sweep towards Genshin. The large sword's speed was not slow either. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived behind Genshin. Finally, accompanied by a strong gust of wind, it cut through Genshin's waist without any resistance. Chapter 94. Dodging the middle-aged man's sword, Genshin's body flashed as he appeared in front of the Saint Realm mercenaries. His light wind sword was as fast as lightning as he stabbed out. At the same time, the mercenaries raised their saint weapons and slashed towards Genshin. Ding, ding, ding! The sounds of weapons colliding rang out. In a short period of time, Genshin had already stabbed out more than 10 times, deflecting the saint weapons of the mercenaries. Afterwards, Genshin didn't hesitate in the slightest. The light wind sword in his hand emitted a hazy glow as he took advantage of the fact that the mercenaries were trying to regain control of their saint weapons. Once again, the light wind sword turned into a silver-white streak of lightning and stabbed out. Pooh! 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 In a short period of time, Genshin's light wind sword had stabbed out 3 times, each time accurately hitting a mercenary's throat. The 3 mercenaries' bodies suddenly stiffened as blood gushed out from their throats. In a blink of an eye, their necks were dyed red as their bodies slowly fell to the ground. At this moment, a sharp sound pierced through the air. Feeling the sudden attack, Genshin's body immediately spun and moved 2 meters to the side. However, before Genshin could stabilize himself, another sharp gust of wind rushed towards him. In a blink of an eye, it was right in front of Genshin. Genshin's expression didn't change as he raised his light wind sword to block. Dang! A large sword fiercely struck Genshin's light wind sword. The terrifying force from the large sword caused Genshin's body to uncontrollably fly back a few meters. So, at the same time that Genshin's body flew back, a 3-meter-long silver spear followed closely behind him. With an ear-piercing sound, it pierced towards Genshin's heart. Feeling the powerful saint force from the silver spear, Genshin's expression couldn't help but become more serious. The second Saint Master in this group of mercenaries had finally made his move. Genshin exerted force with his feet, leaving a deep footprint on the ground as he forcibly stopped himself from retreating. His right arm suddenly shook as the 2-finger thick light wind sword met the silver spear head-on. Ding! The tip of the light wind sword and the silver spear collided in midair. Seeing this, Genshin's eyes flashed with a cold light as a sharp sword chi shot out from the light wind sword and traveled along the silver spear towards the 30-year-old youth. Sensing Genshin's intention, the youth's face revealed a disdainful sneer. Immediately after, a large amount of saint force gushed out from his body and rushed towards the light wind sword. As for Genshin's sword chi, it was immediately blocked by the youth's large amount of saint force, causing it to quickly weaken. Genshin's eyes flashed with a sharp light. It seemed that he was also going to compete with the youth. Immediately after, an even more powerful and sharp sword chi gushed out from the light wind sword and rushed towards the youth's large amount of saint force. Boom! When Genshin's unique sword chi collided with the youth's saint force, a low rumbling sound rang out. Immediately after, a berserk energy spread out from the point of contact between the 2 saint weapons, wreaking havoc in all directions. Genshin and the youth's body were both pushed back by the powerful force. Every time the youth took a step back, he would leave a deep footprint on the ground. On the other hand, Genshin's body seemed to be incomparably agile. His feet touched the ground and his body swayed left and right, quickly dispersing the chi that was pushing him back. However, Just as Jianchen stabilized his body, a fierce qi came from behind him and closed in on him in the blink of an eye. Jian Chen's face changed slightly. He had used up quite a lot of energy when he clashed with the spear-wielding young man earlier. Right now, he was completely exhausted, so he was unable to use enough Saint force to block the powerful attack from the Saint Master behind him. In a moment of desperation, Jianchen rolled on the ground to dodge the attack. Even though that was the case, a bone-deep wound still appeared on his back from the huge sword. The youth with the large sword did not show any mercy, and once again raised his large sword towards Jianchen. Feeling the burning pain from his back, Jianchen clenched his teeth and slapped the ground with his left hand. His whole body immediately spun up from the ground and then slightly leaned his body to the side, dodging the youth's large sword by a hair's breadth. The youth with the light wind sword in his hand was like a bolt of lightning, piercing towards the youth with extreme speed. The youth with the light wind sword was startled. He had just attacked with his saint weapon, and at this critical moment, it was already too late for him to withdraw it. In a moment of desperation, the youth with the light wind sword slightly tilted his head and narrowly dodged the sword that was aimed at his throat. Even though he had dodged a fatal blow, his neck was still cut by the light wind sword. Jianchen's face revealed a cold smile. With a twist of his wrist, the light wind sword continued to chase after the youth. Before the youth could even react, the light wind sword had already cut across his neck. Following the flash of silver light from the youth's neck, the youth with the light wind sword froze in place as blood began to flow out from his neck. The youth with the light wind sword stared at Jianchen in disbelief. He raised his hand with great difficulty and pointed at Jianchen with trembling fingers. It seemed as if he wanted to say something, but the wound on his neck prevented him from saying anything. In the end, he was unable to say anything, and his body fell to the ground. Seeing the youth lying on the ground, the rest of the mercenaries' faces all changed. Some of them even looked at Jianchen with a rarely seen look of fear. After killing the youth, Jianchen did not give the rest of the mercenaries any time to catch their breaths. With the light wind sword in hand, he once again charged towards the rest of the mercenaries. Seeing Jianchen charging towards them, the only remaining Saint Master among the mercenaries immediately blocked in front of Jianchen. The silver spear in his hand became a blur as he attacked Jianchen. As for the rest of the Saint Masters, when they saw that the Saint Master had died under Jianchen's sword, none of them dared to move forward. In their hearts, they were already thinking of retreating. If it wasn't for the fact that there was another Saint Master present, they would have already fled. Ding, ding, ding. The sounds of collisions echoed throughout the quiet forest. In just a few seconds, Jianchen and the youth had exchanged more than 10 blows. Now that there was no one else to hold them back, Jianchen relied on the sharpness of his sword qi and his speed to gain the upper hand. In the blink of an eye, the youth was forced into a defensive position. This was because Jianchen's sword was simply too fast. It was so fast that the youth did not dare to attack and could only passively defend. Otherwise, by the time he attacked, Jianchen's light wind sword would have already pierced through his body. Moreover, facing Jianchen, who was so close to him, the youth was unable to use his spear to its full potential. He felt as if his hands and feet were tied. After reaching the Saint Master realm, Jianchen's battle prowess had also increased by several times. Now that he had the advantage, he was able to fight against a Saint Master who was 1 level higher than him. After a dozen or so exchanges, Jianchen and the young man separated once again. However, the young man seemed to be in a much worse shape now. His clothes had been completely destroyed, and there were a few bone-deep wounds on his body. There was an extremely thin sword mark on his neck, which just happened to cut through a layer of skin there. On the other hand, Jianchen did not seem to have changed much apart from the bloody wound on his back. His face was just a bit pale. Staring at Jianchen with a serious expression, the youth shouted, "The enemy is too strong. I will stop him." everyone quickly escape. After the previous exchange, the youth knew that Genshin was ruthless. He knew that it was very likely that he would not be able to leave this place alive. Thus, he immediately made the worst decision possible. His heart was as clear as snow. He knew that once they knew about the silver-striped golden snake, in order to keep this secret, Genshin would definitely kill them all, not letting a single one of them leave this place alive to spread the news. Because if it was him, he would also do the same. This was the rule of survival in the Tianyuan continent. Everything was decided by strength. Whoever had the biggest fist would have the last laugh. Hearing the young man's words, the rest of the mercenaries were shocked. They immediately fled the area as fast as they could, fleeing in all directions. Seeing the mercenaries flee in all directions, Genshin's face suddenly sank. Holding his sword, he once again charged towards the youth. Ah! The youth let out a shout as he fearlessly charged towards Genshin. With Genshin's speed, he knew that it would be very difficult for him to escape today. Rather than that, he might as well leave his life behind to buy time for the other mercenaries. Once they spread the news about the silver-striped golden snake, there would be someone to avenge him. Ding! The light wind sword and the long spear collided in midair, creating a dazzling spark. Under the youth's control, the long spear flicked towards the light wind sword. Immediately, Genshin's light wind sword was flicked high into the air by the long spear. Seeing this, the youth was stunned for a moment. However, his eyes immediately revealed a trace of ecstasy. He immediately controlled the long spear to pierce towards Genshin's throat. Genshin's mouth revealed a trace of disdain. His powerful saint force immediately covered his palms. Both of his palms turned into a blur as he tightly grabbed onto the long spear. At the same time, the light wind sword that was still ascending into the air suddenly stopped. Immediately after, an even sharper and more powerful sword chi appeared around the light wind sword, enveloping the light wind sword. With a flash of silver light, the light wind sword pierced through the air at an extremely fast speed. With an ear-piercing screech, the light wind sword pierced through the youth's throat and disappeared into the forest behind him. Ah! Ah! At the same time, several miserable shrieks came from the surrounding forest. Chapter 95. Using the Sword of God, Genshin managed to kill the young man with the strength of a Saint Master by taking him by surprise. Even the fleeing mercenaries were unable to escape successfully. They all died at Genshin's hands. A silver-white streak of light flashed out of the forest and flew towards Genshin with lightning speed. Genshin extended his hand slightly and received the incoming streak of light. In just a short moment, the streak of light had arrived before Genshin's hand and suddenly stopped. It turned into a silver-white sword that radiated with surging sword chi. When Genshin reached out to grab the hilt of the light wind sword, the light wind sword suddenly disappeared without a trace. After that, the light wind sword also disappeared from Genshin's hand. Phew! Genshin let out a long breath. After going through 2 battles in a row, he was not as relaxed as he seemed on the surface. After killing the silver-striped golden snake, he had also killed 2 Saint Masters who were as strong as him, causing the Saint force in his body to be almost completely depleted. If it weren't for the fact that the Azulite sword codex he cultivated was extraordinary, allowing the Saint force in his body to reach a miraculous state of endless growth, Genshin probably wouldn't have been able to handle the next battle after killing the silver-striped golden snake. Genshin slightly twisted his body. Just as he was about to move, the wound on his back suddenly felt a burning pain. The intense pain caused Genshin's facial muscles to twitch a few times. It really hurts, Genshin muttered to himself. With a thought, the powerful divine sword immediately controlled the Saint Chi in the air and gathered it towards him. Gradually, a layer of hazy white light appeared around Genshin's body. As the Saint Chi continued to increase, the white light became brighter and brighter. In less than 2 breaths of time, the hazy white light had completely turned into a dazzling, milky white light. Although the light was very dazzling, it was very gentle and not dazzling to the eyes. Bathed in the dazzling, milky white light, Genshin's body was faintly discernible. It was already very difficult to see his appearance. The deep wound on his back that was so deep that it could be seen to the bone was healing at a visible rate under the effects of the Saint Chi. Under the envelopment of the Saint Chi, a comfortable feeling spontaneously arose from the bottom of Genshin's heart. Very quickly, it spread throughout his entire body. Even with Genshin's mental fortitude, he could not help but tremble. Although Genshin had already used the Saint Chi to resist the spread of the silver-striped golden snake's poison, at that time, Genshin's mind was completely tense. He was constantly on guard against the silver-striped golden snake, so he did not have the mind to feel the comfortable feeling of being enveloped by the Saint Chi. Now that his mind was completely relaxed, Genshin finally understood that being enveloped by the Saint Chi was actually a very comfortable feeling. The Saint Chi only lasted for a short while before gradually disappearing. Genshin's figure also reappeared in his line of sight. Genshin twisted his body and then extended his hand to touch the wound on his back. It was smooth to the touch. Aside from the moist feeling of his blood-soaked clothes, he did not feel any pain at all. Genshin could not even find a single scar on the wound on his back. Nodding his head in satisfaction, Genshin could not help but smile happily. The Saint Chi really did have an unbelievably miraculous effect when it came to healing. With this technique, Genshin would have even more methods to protect himself on the Tianyuan continent in the future. However, at this moment, a wave of dizziness suddenly appeared in Genshin's head. Genshin's head swayed slightly, but he stabilized it very quickly. At the same time, a wave of exhaustion suddenly assaulted Genshin's mind. At this moment, Genshin felt like an ordinary person who had not slept for an entire day and night. His mind was severely lacking, and he wanted to immediately find a bed to sleep comfortably. Oh no! Using my soul to control swords and radiant Saint Chi in the surroundings takes an extremely large toll on my soul. I've clearly used up too much of my soul. Genshin's heart sank slightly as he exclaimed inside. At the same time, he understood that it would be best if he used his soul to control swords and gather radiant Saint Chi sparingly in the future. Otherwise, once he used up too much of his soul, it would greatly affect his ability to unleash his full strength. Fortunately, although Genshin's soul was severely depleted, it was not at a critical point. It would not affect his ability to unleash his full strength. Genshin took out a set of clean clothes from his space pouch and changed into them. He glanced past the mercenaries on the ground before looking at the space pouches around their waists. A gleam of anticipation flashed through his bright eyes. I hope there are some good things in there, Genshin thought to himself. On the Tianyuan continent, the majority of people kept all their belongings in their space pouches. It could be said that a space pouch could very well contain all of a person's wealth. Of course, some of the weaker mercenaries were pitifully poor and did not have anything decent on them. Genshin did not touch the space pouches on the mercenaries. Instead, he quickly walked over to the silver-striped golden snake and took out a space ring from his bosom. He placed the snake inside the space ring. However, the silver-striped golden snake's body was just too long. Genshin spent an entire incense stick's worth of time to completely place it into the space ring. Only when he hung the space ring on his chest did Genshin let out a sigh of relief. He could not hide the joy he felt inside. Invulnerable to poison. Invulnerable to poison. Genshin's mind constantly recalled the various benefits of invulnerable to poison. Now that he had a complete, silver-striped golden snake in his hands, the rest of the snake's blood was perfectly preserved in the snake's body. It could be said that as long as he had enough time, Genshin could use the snake's blood and gallbladder to cultivate an invulnerable to poison using a special method. Slowly calming himself down, Genshin walked over to the mercenaries' corpses and removed the space pouches from their waists one by one. Finally, after confirming that there were no other items on their bodies, he slowly left the place and disappeared into the forest. Genshin found an empty spot and sat down cross-legged after leaving the place where the fight had taken place. He then took out the 20-plus space pouches and began to tidy up the items inside. There were a lot of things inside the space pouches. Most of them were necessities for survival in the wild, such as blankets, tents, food, drinking water. Just these alone took up half of the space in the space pouches. They were all worthless items with only a pitiful few gold coins, silver coins, and copper coins scattered in a corner of the space pouches. However, Genshin was too lazy to even look at this amount of money. After continuously rummaging through several space pouches, Genshin actually did not find a single valuable item in these space pouches. These space pouches only contained some worthless daily necessities and some healing medicines. There was not even a single rank 1 monster core. Genshin did not show the slightest sign of discouragement. He was very clear that since this group of mercenaries hunted magical beasts for a living in the forest, their belongings were naturally pitifully small. If he wanted to find anything valuable on them, he was afraid that he would only find some low-rank monster cores. After continuously rummaging through more than 10 space pouches, Genshin finally found a small pile of monster cores in one of the space pouches. There were a total of 10 monster cores, but almost all of them were rank 1 or 2. Genshin took out the monster cores from the space pouches and continued to rummage through the rest of the space pouches. Very quickly, more than 20 space pouches were rummaged through by Genshin. Genshin casually threw these low-rank space pouches to the side and stared at the small pile of monster cores and the small amount of money in front of him. His face could not help but reveal a trace of helplessness. From the 20-plus space belts, he only found 20-plus magic cores and a total of nearly 100 purple coins. Among the 20-plus magic cores, only one was a grade 3 magic core, 6 were grade 2 magic cores, and the rest were all grade 1 magic cores. Looking at the monster cores in front of him with a bitter smile, Genshin helplessly shook his head. He did not know whether to laugh or cry as he said, "Isn't this a little too low? A team with 2 Saint Master strength actually only obtained so few monster cores. It's not even as much as what I get in a day." Afterwards, Genshin put these monster cores and the small amount of money into his space pouch one after another, got up and left this place. For the next period of time, Genshin continued to wander in the magical beast forest. However, after the chase with the silver-striped golden snake, he was now close to the depths of the magical beast mountain range. The magical beasts that appeared here were almost all rank 3 in strength. Rank 2 magical beasts were already very rare. As for the rank 3 magical beasts, the threat to Genshin, who had broken through to the Great Saint Realm, had weakened a lot. Although it was a little laborious to kill them, the harvest here was much more abundant than hunting rank 2 magical beasts. This was because a rank 3 monster core contained 10 times the energy of a rank 2 monster core. Moreover, in terms of purity, it was also much higher than rank 2 magical beasts. With Genshin's current consumption for cultivation, 3 rank 3 monster cores were enough for him to use for a night. Even so, the consumption rate was still astonishing. In the blink of an eye, Genshin had stayed in the magical beast forest for another 10 days. During these 10 days, Genshin still walked in the mountain range to hunt magical beasts during the day and found a safe and hidden place to cultivate at night. After these 10 days of cultivation, Genshin's strength also improved rapidly. Although his strength was still at the beginner Great Saint Realm, he clearly felt that he was not far from the intermediate Great Saint Realm. Chapter 96. In these 10 days, although the number of Class 3 magical beasts that Genshin had hunted couldn't be compared to the number of magical beasts he had hunted in Kargath Academy, his harvest was still very large. On average, Jianqin had harvested about 20 Class 3 magic cores in a day, and a small number of Class 2 magic cores as well. With the 3 Class 3 magic cores that Jianqin required for his daily cultivation, his harvest in a day was enough to support his cultivation needs for 7 days. What Jianqin didn't know was that because he was walking alone in the Magic Beast Mountain range, the chances of encountering magical beasts were much higher than the mercenaries who came in groups. This was because many of these magical beasts were born with an extremely sensitive sense of smell and vigilance. Moreover, they were born in the forest, and their ability to track people was also very outstanding. Once they sensed a group that was too strong and had a large number of people, these magical beasts would either be cautious or immediately run far away. Although these magical beasts didn't have any intelligence, their instincts to survive in the Magic Beast Mountain range had already been deeply ingrained in their minds. If they encountered someone who wasn't strong and was alone, these magical beasts that were hiding in the dark would usually take the initiative to find them after thinking that they could take them down. There was simply no need to deliberately search for them. Therefore, Jianqin was able to encounter so many magical beasts in a single day in this huge Magic Beast Mountain range. If it wasn't for Jianqin's extremely powerful spirit that could precisely detect the movements in his surroundings, perhaps he would have already been beaten black and blue by these magical beasts. Early the next morning, Jianqin, who was sitting cross-legged under a large tree in cultivation, slowly opened his eyes. He then stood up from the ground and patted some dust off his body before checking the magic cores in his space belt. During this period of time, he had obtained quite a number of magic cores from hunting magical beasts in the Magic Beast Mountain range. Even after deducting the magic cores that he had consumed during his cultivation, he still had quite a lot of stock in his space ring. There are still more than 50 Class 2 magic cores and more than 120 Class 3 magic cores. After checking his space belt, Jianqin nodded with satisfaction. Currently, he needed to consume more than 20 Class 2 magic cores for a night of cultivation. The magic cores in his space belt were enough for him to cultivate for 2 nights, and the 120 Class 3 magic cores were enough for him to cultivate for 40 nights. Of course, if he were to continuously absorb the energy from the magic cores to cultivate for the entire day, then all these magic cores would only be enough for him to cultivate for 10 days. And there are also 2 Class 4 magic cores. One was obtained when I won an award at Kargath Academy, and the other was given to me by Father before I left. The energy within a Class 4 magic core is much higher than a Class 3 magic core. I wonder how long I can use a Class 4 magic core. Jianqin thought to himself. Unknowingly, the monster cores he possessed were a great fortune to any other mercenary. However, in Jianqin's eyes, they were only enough to sustain him for 10 days of cultivation. Jianqin looked up at the blazing sun that was slowly rising in the sky. After determining his position, he didn't even eat breakfast and once again set off on his journey, cautiously making his way towards the outskirts of the mountain range of magical beasts. By now, Jianqin had already been in the Magic Beast Mountain range for quite some time, and the magic cores in his space ring were enough for him to use for a few days. Furthermore, after these few days of consumption, Jianqin's supplies were running low. Therefore, he had to return to Wake City to replenish his supplies. Most importantly, the silver-striped golden snake that Jianqin had placed in his space ring had to be dealt with urgently. Otherwise, if it was left for too long, who knew what unpredictable situations might occur, such as the decomposition of the corpse and other factors. Jianqin had never read about this in any books. So to be on the safe side, Jianqin decided to deal with the silver-striped golden snake as soon as possible. In the Magic Beast Mountain range, magic beasts roamed everywhere, and the smell of blood was especially sensitive to them. Dealing with the silver-striped golden snake here was undoubtedly very unwise. Therefore, regarding the matter of the silver-striped golden snake, Jianqin could only make plans after returning to Wake City. Not only were the weeds in the Magic Beast Mountain range very dense, but there were also many swamps that were covered by the weeds. It was very difficult to see them from the surface, so Jianchen was very careful as he walked. During these few days, Jianchen had also fallen into a swamp several times, but in the end he was able to successfully escape. With the sun in the sky as his guide, Jianchen did not deviate from the path on his way out of the magic beast mountain range. After walking like this for 2 days, he finally made it out of the magic beast mountain range and arrived at a plain outside the forest. During these 2 days, Jianchen's space belt had also gained a few rank 1 and 2 magic cores. Taking in a few deep breaths of the fresh air that was completely different from the air in the magic beast mountain range, Jianchen lowered his head to look at the clothes he was wearing that were completely made of animal hide and his body that was emitting a towering stench of sweat. His face couldn't help but reveal a trace of a bitter smile. Right now, his appearance was even worse than that of a beggar. It was a pity that there wasn't much water in the magic beast mountain range, so Jianchen had no way to wash off the smell of sweat on his body. Not far from the outskirts of the magic beast mountain range, there just happened to be a river. Jianchen quickly found the river according to his memory. He immediately took off the animal hide on his body and jumped into the rapidly flowing river, refreshing his body. The stench of sweat that had accumulated on his body over the past few days had almost formed a layer of armor on his body. Every time Jianchen moved his body, he would feel extremely uncomfortable. The slippery and sticky feeling on his body made him feel very uncomfortable. However, because he was in the magic beast mountain range, Jianchen endured it. Now that he saw the river, he couldn't help but jump in. Jianchen wrapped the space belt around his neck and sunk his entire body into the water, happily rubbing his body. As his hands continuously rubbed, the river water around his body was immediately tainted black. After washing his body, Jianchen didn't leave the river. Instead, his entire body lazily lay in the river water, slightly closing his eyes and allowing the surging river water to wash over his body. At this moment, his mind was completely relaxed, enjoying the cool feeling of the river water washing over his body. During the past few days in the magic beast mountain range, he had been constantly vigilant, causing Jianchen to feel a wave of mental exhaustion. Now that he was relaxed, the relaxed and comfortable feeling that came from the depths of his soul made Jianchen want to sleep comfortably. Jianchen closed his eyes and lazily laid in the river water, bathing in the warm sunlight. His naked body was constantly lifted up and down by the waves of the river, slowly being carried downstream by the river water. The downstream of the river just happened to be in the direction of Wake City, so Jianchen completely treated this as a free ride. Not only could he hurry along, but he could also take advantage of this time to enjoy himself. Jianchen had completely forgotten about the time. He didn't know how long his body had been carried by the flowing river water. However, at this moment, Jianchen felt his head hit something soft. Moreover, from the feeling of his head hitting something soft, Jianchen knew that when his head hit that soft thing, it seemed to move a little as if it was alive. A living thing. Jianchen's originally drowsy mind suddenly became alert, and in an instant he became awake. Even his originally calm spirit became active at this moment. Every movement around him was transmitted into Jianchen's mind, and in a short moment, he went from being drowsy to being highly focused. Jianchen's originally closed eyes suddenly opened, and suddenly, 2 faint rays of light flashed in his eyes. Following that, Jianchen suddenly flipped over, and his originally drifting body immediately stood up. His entire body floated in the river water, and only his upper body was above the water. However, just as Jianchen finished this action, a human face appeared in front of his eyes. This was a woman's face, and her appearance was devastatingly beautiful. Her face was as white as mutton fat, and her exquisite facial features were flawless. No one could find any fault with her, as if she was a fairy descending from the heavens. From the woman's devastatingly beautiful appearance, she didn't look very old, about 18 or 19 years old. At this moment, she was staring at Jianchen with her big black and bright eyes, and was looking at Jianchen with a sluggish gaze. The pair of large breasts on her chest were exposed to the air, and were only a wide distance away from Jianchen's chest. Damn, there's actually a woman taking a bath here. Jianchen immediately came to his senses, and his face immediately darkened. His experience from his previous life allowed him to instantly understand what was going on in front of him. He never would have thought that while he was drifting along the river, he would take advantage of this opportunity to take a good rest and relax the high level of concentration he had in the past few days in the magical Beast Mountain Range. Unknowingly, he would be swept by the flowing river water to a woman taking a bath. Just as Jianchen came to his senses, the woman who was staring at him also suddenly came to her senses. Immediately, a sharp scream came from her mouth. "You stinking hooligan." The woman's originally sluggish eyes were now filled with raging anger and shame. With a shout, her palm struck towards Jianchen's chest at lightning speed. Pum! Chapter 97. Jianchen was sent flying by the woman's palm strike. He flew over 20 meters before falling back into the river and sinking to the bottom. A look of shock flashed through Jianchen's eyes. The woman's palm strike contained so much power that even Jianchen was shocked. This palm strike had already caused him quite a bit of damage. Furthermore, where the palm had struck his chest, the bones there throbbed with intense pain. It was as if they were about to shatter from such a heavy blow. Jianchen swung his arm through the water and directly charged out of the water, leaping into the forest on the other side of the river. With a flash, he arrived behind a large tree that would require 2 people to wrap their arms around it. Saint force erupted from his body and directly evaporated the water droplets on his body. Afterward, he swiftly untied the space belt around his neck and took out a complete set of clothes, quickly putting them on. Just as Jianchen finished putting on his clothes, his somewhat pale face suddenly changed, and he immediately leapt to the side. Boom! Just as Jianchen dodged, the tree behind him immediately exploded. A ball of powerful and pure saint force flew out from the scattered pieces of wood. In the end, it struck the spot where he had been standing. As the soil was sent flying, a 2-meter wide crater appeared in his line of sight. "You pervert! You dare peek at me bathing? I'll definitely kill you." As a sobbing voice rang out from nearby, a red figure appeared in front of Jianchen in the blink of an eye. A jade-like, snow-white hand with a ball of water-blue saint force shot toward Jianchen with an ear-piercing sound. Sensing the powerful saint force in the jade-like hand, Jianchen's face suddenly changed. He became unprecedentedly serious, and saint force surged out from his body, gathering in his right hand. His right hand formed a palm and struck out. Bang! When the 2 palms collided, a muffled sound rang out. A powerful force surged out from the 2 palms and shot out in all directions. Jianchen's body flew back as if he had been hit by a heavy blow. He knocked into several small trees along the way before landing miserably on the ground. Uft! As soon as Jianchen landed on the ground, he couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. It turned into a bloody mist that filled the air. His face had already become incomparably pale. Raising his head with great difficulty, Jianchen looked at the girl in front of him in disbelief. He really found it hard to believe that the girl in front of him, who seemed to be about the same age as him, actually possessed such great strength. According to his estimation, the girl in front of him was at least a great saint master, because Jianchen had fought with saint masters in the magical Beast Mountain Range. He knew their strength like the back of his hand. With his current strength, he was already able to face a saint master head-on. However, the feeling the girl in front of him gave Jianchen was that she was an undefeatable existence. Her strength was far greater than a saint master's. Great saint master! Jianchen swallowed his saliva with great difficulty. As soon as he thought of the girl's age and the great strength she possessed, he felt a wave of disbelief. in the Kargath Academy, where all the geniuses of the kingdom of Jesson gathered. There were probably many people of the same age as the girl in front of him who had yet to condense a saint weapon and break through to the saint realm. The girl walked towards Genshin step by step. Her fairy-like beauty that could be said to be unparalleled in the world was currently filled with anger and shame. Her beautiful and lively large eyes had already lost their original charm. They were filled with extremely strong killing intent as she stared fixedly at Genshin. From the looks of it, she wanted nothing more than to cut Genshin into 1,000 pieces. The girl wore a set of pink leather clothes. Her clothes were slightly messy, clearly having been put on in a hurry. She did not have the time to tidy herself up. Her long hair that reached her waist was casually draped behind her back. Her hair was dripping, wet as water constantly dripped from the tips of her hair, soaking her clothes in several places. The girl walked towards Genshin step by step. Her pink and extremely obedient boots stepped on the ground silently. Each step left a deep footprint in the ground. Sky blue Saint Force surged out of the girl's right hand as a 3-finger-wide, 4-foot-long blue sword gradually took shape. The surging Saint Force within the sword made Genshin's expression change. Genshin crawled up from the ground with great difficulty. His right arm trembled slightly. The girl was just too much stronger than him. His entire right arm had been heavily injured from the clash of palms with the girl earlier. Genshin immediately controlled the Radiant Saint Force in the surroundings and quickly healed his wounds without exposing his Radiant Saint Force. Due to the uniqueness of Radiant Saint Force, Genshin did not have to worry about the powerful girl noticing anything as long as the milky white light did not appear. "Hold on, miss. That was a complete misunderstanding. I did not mean to peek at you bathing." Genshin bitterly smiled as he was shocked by the strength the girl had displayed. "Shut up, you pervert." The girl's beautiful face was ashen as her chest heaved up and down. Clearly, she was quite angry. As she spoke, she took a step forward and suddenly kicked towards Genshin's crotch with her cute pink boots. Genshin's expression changed. His body swayed slightly as he dodged the kick by a hair's breadth. At this moment, the girl's sky blue sword slashed down with surging Saint Force. The sword slashed down extremely quickly, arriving before Genshin in the blink of an eye. Genshin twisted his body as hard as he could and quickly dodged. Even so, a long wound still appeared on his chest from the sword. The wound was so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood spurted out like a fountain, quickly dyeing Genshin's clothes red. Ignoring the wound on his chest, Genshin endured the burning pain from his chest and quickly retreated, pulling away from the girl. At the same time, the slender light wind sword appeared in his hand. Although Genshin had seen the girl's body, it wasn't on purpose. He had already apologized time and time again, but the girl still continued to be so aggressive, wanting to kill him. This aroused the anger in Genshin's heart. The girl didn't plan on letting Genshin go so easily. Holding her sword, she chased after Genshin. Her sky blue sword surged with Saint Force as it pierced towards Genshin's chest. Genshin coldly snorted as a cold light flashed in his eyes. Although the girl's strength was much greater than his, he wasn't someone who would just give up without a fight. With a shake of his arm, the light wind sword left behind a silvery white afterimage in the air as it pierced towards the girl's throat with lightning-like speed. This sword was the fastest speed Genshin could reach. Facing the girl, who was much stronger than him, Genshin didn't dare to hold back and used all of his strength. Facing the girl's sword attack, Genshin didn't even try to dodge. Just as the sky blue sword was about to pierce Genshin's body slightly twisted, causing the sword that was originally aimed at his heart to end up piercing his left shoulder instead. Genshin's light wind sword was already at the girl's throat. At this moment, a trace of panic appeared on the young girl's face. Her mouth emitted a magnetic cry of alarm. Then, She tried her best to twist her neck and narrowly avoided the long sword that was aimed at her throat. Even so, there was a faint trace of blood on her tender neck. A slight pain was transmitted from her neck, causing a trace of panic to faintly appear in the young girl's eyes. That pair of bright eyes actually revealed a little fear for the first time. Seeing this, Gentian sneered. Although the girl in front of him was stronger than him, she clearly lacked battle experience. She had never experienced a cruel battle before, and now that she was in danger, she was panicking. However, Gentian didn't plan on letting the girl go. The intense pain from his chest caused Gentian to become even more vicious. The light wind sword turned into a blur as it chased after the girl. The girl's face became even more panicked. However, just as the light wind sword was about to pierce her body, the girl's body suddenly disappeared in front of Gentian's eyes. When she reappeared, she was already more than 10 meters away. It was almost as if she had teleported. Gentian was startled. His eyes were filled with shock as he looked at the girl who was more than 10 meters away. But when he saw the girl's pale face, he realized that using such a fast movement skill must have consumed a lot of her energy. Could it be that this is also a special battle skill? Gentian thought to himself, "You bastard, you actually dared to make a move against this lady. This lady will definitely not let you off." Being forced into such a difficult situation by someone who was far weaker than her, the girl was both shocked and angry. With a sweet shout, the girl's sword emitted a blue light as a powerful saint force surged out from her body and gathered on the blue sword in her hand. The girl raised her sword and shouted, "First form of the Imperial Water Style, Water Dragon Strike." As soon as she finished speaking, the surging saint force that had gathered on the girl's sword actually turned into an indescribable dragon in a short moment. It then broke through the restraints of the sword and roared as it charged toward Gentian. Gentian's face slightly changed because the moment the huge dragon broke free from the bindings of the sword, a powerful pressure came from the water dragon and pressed down on his body. At that moment, Gentian felt as if he was carrying 1,000 gene boulder on his back. Not only was it difficult to move, even breathing was difficult. Gentian's face changed. In his current state, there was no way for him to dodge the attack of the water dragon. The only way was to take it head-on. But when he felt the surging saint force coming from the water dragon, he felt a wave of bitterness in his heart. This kind of powerful attack was far from what he could handle. "Since you're so oppressive, then don't blame me for being ruthless." Gentian's eyes flashed with a cold light. The light wind sword in his hand suddenly emitted a powerful sword chi that enveloped the entire sword. Soon after, the light wind sword left Gentian's hand and shot towards the girl with lightning speed. Its speed was so fast that the naked eye couldn't even see it clearly. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of the girl. The sharp sword chi, coming from the tip of the sword, caused the girl's neck to feel a slight pain. The girl's face turned pale with fright. Previously, she had used a secret technique to dodge Gentian's attack. Now, she had expended a large amount of saint force to use this water dragon battle skill. Under the continuous consumption of saint force, the saint force in her body was completely depleted. Facing the light wind, sword flying towards her, she had no more saint force to dodge. In a moment of desperation, the girl immediately controlled the water dragon that was flying towards Gentian to block the light wind sword. Suddenly, the water dragon that was flying towards Gentian suddenly turned around and chased after the light wind sword. It opened its mouth wide and bit towards the light wind sword. But the light wind sword's speed was much faster than the water dragon. This time, the water dragon bit into empty air. At this time, the light wind sword was less than a meter away from the girl's neck. "How dare you attack the young miss?" At this critical moment, an old man's voice rang out from the sky. His voice was loud and resounding throughout the sky. Following the voice, a tall figure appeared out of thin air in front of the young girl, blocking her light wind sword. This was an old man. He was very tall and sturdy. Just his height alone was more than 2 meters. The old man wore a white robe, and his shoulder-length hair was tied behind his head with a jade-like luster. The old man looked to be around 60 years old. He had a pair of thick white eyebrows and a pair of deep and sharp eyes. He gave people a feeling that he was as sharp as a sword. Looking at the light-winged sword that was flying towards him, the old man's eyes showed a trace of disdain. He coldly snorted, and a pair of strong hands suddenly appeared in the air. With only 2 fingers, he caught the light-winged sword that was flying towards him. The light-winged sword's powerful and sharp sword aura was actually unable to harm the old man in the slightest. Immediately after, the old man casually waved his other hand, and the water dragon that was flying towards the young girl came to an abrupt stop. In the next moment, it disappeared into thin air, turning into pure yuan qi that returned to the world. "Uncle Feng, quickly help me kill him." Seeing the old man suddenly appear, the girl's face did not show the slightest bit of surprise. She immediately opened her mouth and shouted. Her angry voice actually contained a trace of grievance. Chapter 98. "Uncle Feng, why are you wasting your breath on him? Help me kill him." The girl behind the old man said in a hurry. Her large, bright eyes that were filled with anger gradually became moist. As soon as she thought about how Jianchen had seen her naked body and how she had been less than a foot away from Jianchen, the girl felt an uncontrollable rage and extreme humiliation, as well as some grievance. This was the first time her body had been seen by a boy since she was young. Moreover, it was a boy she did not know. For the girl who had always been conservative, this was even worse than killing her. "Haha, miss, since your Uncle Feng is unwilling to take action, let your Uncle Yin help you teach this brat a lesson." At this moment, another voice rang out. Before the voice had even finished, another old man in white robes seemed to appear out of nowhere. He suddenly appeared before Jianchen and casually swung his powerful hand towards Jianchen's chest. The old man's strength was unfathomable in Jianchen's eyes. Jianchen dared not be careless at all as he faced the palm strike. He immediately dodged to the side as hard as he could. However, as soon as Jianchen moved, a terrifying pressure suddenly appeared, pressing down on Jianchen viciously. Under the pressure, Jianchen's organs all endured a force of 10,000 kilograms. It was like a mountain was pressing down on him. Not only did it make it difficult for him to breathe, but it also made it feel like his organs were about to be crushed. As Jianchen endured the tremendous pressure, the violet and azure specks of light in his dantian began to flicker. However, Jianchen did not notice the changes to the 2 specks of light in his dantian. "Old man Yin, please wait." Seeing the old man who had already attacked Jianchen, the expression of the old man who was called Uncle Feng changed slightly as he called out in a low voice. Unfortunately, it was already too late. The old man who called himself Uncle Yin had already struck Jianchen's chest with lightning speed, even though it seemed like a casual palm strike. A mouthful of blood mixed with crushed organs was violently spat out from Jianchen's mouth. The old man's palm had completely caved in Jianchen's chest. Not only had the powerful palm force truly shattered the bones in front of Jianchen's chest, but even Jianchen's organs had been shattered by the old man's powerful palm force. The moment Jianchen was hit by the old man, 2 faint, indistinguishable rays of light, one purple and one green, flashed from his chest. After coming into contact with the old man's palm, they disappeared in an instant. Jianchen's body was also violently sent flying. The old man's expression changed slightly as he softly exclaimed. His eyes were filled with shock as he stared at Jianchen, who had been sent flying. A trace of disbelief and astonishment appeared in his eyes. Jianchen flew over 30 meters before crashing to the ground. Large mouthfuls of blood and crushed organs continuously sprayed out from his mouth. His face had become as pale as a sheet of paper without a trace of blood. Even his expression had withered. Seeing Jianchen still alive, The eyes of the old man, who was called Uncle Yin, flickered with uncertainty. In the end, he said, "Good boy, you're quite lucky. You actually survived my palm strike. Whatever, I'll let you go for now." With that, Old Man Fong turned around and walked towards the girl behind him. "AI, let's hope you don't cause too much trouble." The old man, who was standing in front of the girl, who was called Uncle Fong, whispered in a low voice. With a wave of his left hand, the light wind sword that was caught between two fingers flew towards Genshin. Just as it touched Genshin's body, it suddenly disappeared. "Young miss, let's go." With that said, the old man called Uncle Fong let out a loud eagle's cry. A large flying magical beast descended from the sky and landed in front of the two people. The anger on the girl's face still hadn't subsided. She anxiously said, "Uncle Fong, that person isn't dead yet. No, I must kill him today." With that said, the girl raised her sword and walked towards Genshin. Obviously, she didn't want to avoid the fact that Genshin had peeped on her bathing. "Young miss, don't cause trouble." The old man called Uncle Fong immediately reached out to stop the girl. "Uncle Fong!" The girl didn't comply. Her beautiful face was filled with grievances. Her eyes were misty, and it seemed as if she was about to cry at any moment. "Young miss, don't be so stubborn. It's getting late, we should hurry on our way." At this time, the other old man came in front of the girl and said in a very calm tone. With that said, the old man gently waved his hand and a large amount of Saint Chi wrapped around the girl's body. Then, he gently placed her on the back of the flying magical beast. On the back of the flying magical beast, the girl anxiously stomped her feet. She angrily glared at the old man who had placed her on the back of the flying magical beast and angrily said, "Uncle Fong, why don't you love Luaner any more?" The two old men looked at each other. Their eyes showed a trace of helplessness. Then, they jumped on the flying magical beast at the same time. Immediately, a fierce wind blew. The flying magical beast flapped its huge wings and flew into the distant sky. In the sky, the girl stood on the back of the flying magical beast and looked down at the shrinking Genshin on the ground. The resentment in her eyes did not disappear. Uncle Fong, what's wrong with the two of you? Why did you let that hoodlum go?" The girl angrily stomped her feet. Her face was filled with grievances, and tears were already rolling in her eyes. Hearing this, the old man called Uncle Fong sighed. With his experience, it was not difficult for him to guess what had just happened from the girl's still wet hair. "Young miss, that person is not simple. Right now, the clan is under great pressure. At this critical moment, it's best if we don't make too many enemies, so as to avoid bringing disaster to the clan," Uncle Fong said. His voice was filled with helplessness. "Uncle Fong, when did you become so cowardly? That bastard is pitifully weak. How could he be a threat to our clan?" The girl angrily said, "Young miss, that person really is not simple. It's best if we don't offend him. Although he is very weak, there is definitely a powerful force behind him." The one who spoke was the old man who had injured Genshin and was called Uncle Yin by the girl. At this moment, the old man's face was filled with seriousness, as if he was worried about something. Immediately after, the old man slowly lifted his right hand that was wrapped in the long sleeves of his robe. On his palm, there were two deep wounds. Although the blood had already stopped, one could still see that the wounds on the old man's right hand, from the center of his palm to the back of his hand, had been completely pierced through by a sharp weapon. When the girl saw the shocking wounds on the old man's palm, her cherry-like mouth immediately opened wide. Her beautiful eyes did not blink as she stared at the old man's injured palm in disbelief. She cried out, "Uncle Yin, you're injured." The girl's voice was filled with shock and disbelief. Uncle Feng's expression changed as well. He exclaimed in a deep voice, "Old man Yin, you're actually injured?" His voice was filled with disbelief. Uncle Yin slowly nodded and said, "This wound was left behind by that brat in his early 20s. How is that possible? Uncle Yin, you're not joking, right? That bastard is so weak. He can't even defeat me. How could he have injured you? The girl immediately jumped up and cried out loudly. Old man Yin, how did the wound on your palm come about? Uncle Fong asked in a deep voice. His voice was filled with doubt. Old man Yin was also at a loss as he said, I don't know either. At that time, when my hand struck that person's body, a huge pain came from my palm, and then I was injured. As for what exactly injured me, I don't know at all. Uncle Yun gasped when he heard this. He murmured, This brat really is not simple. When I first saw his saint weapon, I had already guessed it. His saint weapon is also different from others. It's completely different from ordinary people's. There seems to be something inside that makes the saint weapon even more powerful. It's completely different from his own strength. The young girl standing at the side was also stunned by Uncle Yun's words. Fortunately, I didn't kill that brat. Otherwise, if he really did have some powerful faction behind him, I would have caused a huge problem for my family. Right now, I can only hope that the faction behind that brat isn't too powerful. Or perhaps he's just a lucky brat who obtained the legacy of a predecessor. Near the river, Jian Qin lay powerlessly on the ground. His clothes had already been dyed red with blood. The old man's palm strike had left Jian Qin extremely heavily injured. Not only had the bones in his chest been shattered, even his organs had been heavily injured, to the point where they were almost completely shattered. Now, Jian Qin could not even move his body apart from his mind. This could be said to be the most severe injury he had ever suffered in his entire life. If it were not for the fact that he had cultivated an extraordinary mental cultivation method and had been using Saint Force to refine his body since he was young, causing his body's constitution and vitality to be far greater than ordinary people's, the old man's palm strike probably would have killed him directly. Chapter 99. The radiant Saint Force in the surroundings constantly gathered towards Jian Qin, rapidly healing Jian Qin's wounds. However, because Jian Qin's wounds were just too severe this time, even the radiant Saint Force with its miraculous healing properties struggled to heal his wounds in a short amount of time. Controlling the radiant Saint Force was extremely taxing on Jian Qin's mind. After 4 hours, Jian Qin had used up almost 70% of his mind, forcing him to stop. Now, because he had used up too much of his mind, Jian Qin felt extremely dizzy again, causing his eyes to become tired and drowsy. He was like an ordinary person who had not slept for 3 days and 3 nights, unable to raise his mind at all. After 4 hours of treatment, a small portion of Jian Qin's injuries had recovered. His shattered organs had been nourished by the radiant Saint Force. Although they had not fully recovered, the shattered parts had already regenerated. All that was left was the broken bones in his chest, which were a bit more troublesome to heal. As his wounds were extremely severe, many of the broken bones had pierced into his flesh. As a result, Jian Qin would pull at the wounds in his chest as long as he moved slightly. The heart-wrenching pain from the bones piercing into his flesh was basically the most severe form of torture to the brain. Jian Qin did not want to experience this inhumane torture. As a result, Jian Qin directly laid down on the ground and slowly closed his eyes, slowly recovering his exhausted mind. Fortunately, Jian Qin had completely memorized the contents of the Azulet sword manual. There just happened to be a method of recuperation recorded in there. Using this method of recuperation, Jian Qin's exhausted mind began to slowly recover. Jian Qin laid on the ground for an entire day and night. He did not move at all, and his tightly shut eyes never opened. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, afternoon arrived. The fiery red sun in the sky had already reached the west, and the light it emitted had changed from the initial scorching heat to a gentle warmth. The sun was about to set. At this moment, Jian Qin, who had been lying on the ground without moving for an entire day and night, finally opened his eyes. After a day and night of recovery, he had finally fully recovered from the exhaustion he had suffered. Looking at the sky, Jian Qin did not hesitate at all. He immediately controlled the Radiant Saint Force and began to heal his chest. As the Radiant Saint Force endlessly poured into Jianshin's chest, the almost completely shattered bones in his chest began to reconnect. However, the speed was extremely slow. For hours later, Jianshin had no choice but to disperse the Radiant Saint Force due to his exhausted mind. However, after 4 hours of healing, although Jianshin's chest had not completely recovered, it was still 70% better. It no longer had any effect on his movements. Jianshin simply sat up cross-legged on the ground and continued to use the method recorded in the recuperation chapter to heal his exhausted mind. Although this place was not far from Wake City, Jianshin considered that the dazzling white light emitted by his Radiant Saint Force was too eye-catching. It would be very inconvenient to heal in Wake City. Although the Radiant Saint Force was special and could only be felt by people who were also Radiant Saint Force users, who could guarantee that there were no Radiant Saint Masters in Wake City. Once someone discovered that he could control Radiant Saint Force with how rare and precious Radiant Saint Masters were in the Tianyuan continent, there would be no lack of people who would come to invite him. If that really happened, the fact that he possessed Radiant Saint Force would be exposed to everyone. Although this could temporarily bring him a lot of glory, and he would not even need to worry about the demon cores he needed for cultivation, Jianshin did not want to reveal that he could control Radiant Saint Force like a Radiant Saint Master. This was because he had a feeling that if he continued to hide the fact that he could control Radiant Saint Force, it would definitely be of great help to him in the future. After 3 days of healing, Jianshin's injuries were finally healed. Afterwards, Jianshin left the place. After walking a few kilometers, he arrived at the official road and walked along it towards Wake City. On the official road, caravans and large groups of fully armed mercenaries passed by. Although Jianshin was walking alone on the official road, he did not attract any special attention. Although his clothes had 2 slashes and were stained with blood, in the eyes of the mercenaries who often roamed the Tianyuan continent, this was a very common sight. It could be seen almost anywhere, so it was nothing new. Walking on the official road, Jianshin couldn't help but think of the scene that happened 3 days ago in the river, especially when he was only a foot away from the beautiful girl. This scene left an extremely deep impression on Jianshin. This was because, even if he added up all of his experiences from his previous life, he had never seen such a thing. In fact, 3 days ago was the first time he had seen a girl's body, especially one that was as beautiful as a goddess. However, when Jianshin thought of the great strength that the girl had displayed, he felt a wave of disbelief. This was because the girl only looked to be in her teens, at most 20 years old. Their ages were about the same, but at such a young age, she was no weaker than a great Saint Master. This kind of talent made Jianshin feel ashamed. Very quickly, Jianshin entered Wake City. When the guards at the gate saw that Jianshin was alone and that his body was covered in blood from the battle, they didn't charge Jianshin any fees. Although these guards were often greedy for money, the target of their greed was always targeted. After entering Wake City, Jianshin didn't wander around for long. He directly found an inn to stay in and immediately began to cultivate. Although he had advanced from a saint to a great saint in the past month, this level of strength was still not enough for him to protect himself in the Tianyuan continent. However, the strength that the girl had displayed 3 days ago not only gave Jianshin a lot of inspiration, it also gave Jianshin a strong motivation to charge forward. Jianshin paid enough for the room and stayed in the inn for 10 days. During these 10 days, Jianshin didn't take a single step out of his room. He hid in his room all day and relied on absorbing the energy from the monster cores to cultivate. Even his meals were delivered directly to his room by the inn's waiter. During these 10 days of cultivation, Jianshin's strength had increased by a lot. He had already reached the strength of a mid-level great saint. The saint force in his body was almost twice as strong as when he first entered the great saint realm. As the saint force in his body increased, the light wind sword strength also increased by a lot. Even its toughness had become much stronger than before. After 10 days of non-stop cultivation, Jianqin had used up all the Class 3 monster cores in his spatial belt. He only had 2 Class 4 monster cores left. Jianqin got out of bed and went to the window to look at the sky outside. Because he had spent all day cultivating, Jianqin couldn't even tell the time. He could only rely on the sun in the sky to estimate the time. At this moment, the sun was shining brightly outside. There were no clouds in the sky for thousands of miles. The fiery red sun hung high in the sky, emitting a scorching heat. It was noon. Chapter 100. After leaving the restaurant, Jianqin went to the market and bought a dozen large gourds for storing water and a large wooden barrel large enough to hold a person. Additionally, he replenished his spatial belt with all of the necessities for daily life and wilderness survival. He also bought about 20 sets of coarse cloth clothing. After putting all of these things into his spatial belt, Jianqin directly left Wake City and headed towards the wilderness. Arriving at a small forest with no one around, Jianqin looked left and right. After confirming that there was no one around, he immediately took out his interspatial ring and took out the silver-striped golden snake. After that, he took out all of the gourds he had bought and placed them neatly on the ground. Looking at the 80-meter-long golden-striped silver snake that was only as thick as an arm, Jianqin's heart began to beat uncontrollably. Excitement welled up from the bottom of his heart. After staring at the silver-striped golden snake for a while, Jianqin took a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down. Then he slowly walked in front of the silver-striped golden snake and took out the light wind sword from his right hand. Pooh! Jianqin directly pierced the light wind sword into the silver-striped golden snake's 7-inch scar. Immediately, bright red blood began to flow out. Jianqin didn't hesitate and immediately took out a gourd. Like lightning, he opened the lid of the gourd and placed the gourd's fist-sized mouth under the silver-striped golden snake's body and began to catch the blood that continuously flowed out. At the same time, a thick and pungent smell of blood drifted out and slowly spread in all directions. Smelling the thick and pungent smell of blood, Jianqin wrinkled his eyebrows and muttered, "This silver-striped golden snake is truly worthy of being called a rare beast. I never would have thought that just the smell of blood would be so thick." Jianqin's voice contained a bit of worry. He really was worried that the thick smell of the silver-striped, golden-striped snake's blood would bring him some trouble. Under Jianqin's 50% nervousness, 30% impatience, and 2 people's anticipation, it took him a full 2 hours before he finally emptied the silver-striped, golden snake's blood. As for the dozen or so gourds he had brought, they were already half full. According to Jianqin's estimates, the amount of blood he emptied from the silver-striped, golden snake's body was around 200 kilograms. After carefully sealing the gourds that were filled with the silver-striped, golden snake's blood, he placed them all into his space belt. Next, Jianqin placed the silver-striped, golden snake's body back into his space ring and immediately left. Although the thick smell of blood from the silver-striped golden snake had become very faint after 2 hours, Jianqin couldn't guarantee that there wouldn't be any accidents, so it was better to leave as soon as possible. Although Jianqin knew that his worries were unnecessary, in order to minimize the danger, he was still willing to go through a bit more trouble. Jianqin once again returned to Wake City. After resting in the city for 2 days and seeing that there weren't any special rumors, he once again left the city. This time he didn't return to his original location, but went to a place that was the exact opposite of last time. After walking for nearly 20 kilometers, he finally found a secluded and safe area. He once again took out the silver-striped golden snake and began to dissect the corpse. Although he could still dissect the corpse in the city, the silver-striped golden snake wasn't an ordinary magical beast. Once he dissected the corpse, the thick and pungent smell of blood would once again spread out. Such a unique smell of blood would definitely attract many experts to come and investigate. With Jianqin's current strength, he still wasn't able to contend against the numerous experts in Wake City. Jianqin's dissection of the corpse went very smoothly. Although the silver-striped golden snake's outer layer of skin was very strong, Gentian's current strength was much higher than before. Therefore, cutting through the silver-striped golden snake's skin was not a small matter. Jianqin carefully took out a blood-red object about the size of a thumb from the silver-striped golden snake's abdomen. Holding it in front of his eyes, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of a smile as he muttered, "This is the silver-striped golden snake's precious snake gallbladder." The color of the silver-striped golden snake's gallbladder was completely different from other snakes. Most snake gallbladders were dark green with a hint of black, but the silver-striped golden snake's gallbladder was completely blood-red, just like a ruby. Jianqin took out a small jade bottle from his spatial belt and carefully placed the thumb-sized snake gallbladder into it. This snake gallbladder was very important. If he wanted to cultivate the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body, this snake gallbladder was essential. Its usefulness was many times more precious than the silver-striped golden snake's blood. Very quickly, the silver-striped golden snake's skin was completely laid down by Jianqin. After laying down the snake's skin, the silver-striped golden snake's appearance changed greatly. It now looked like a long snake. The most precious parts of the silver-striped golden snake were its blood and gallbladder. Although the other internal organs and snake meat were also quite valuable, they were not important in Jianqin's eyes. Afterwards, Jianqin directly placed the silver-striped golden snake's body into his spatial ring, planning to do further processing in the future. After dealing with the matter of the silver-striped golden snake, Jianqin looked around and hesitated for a moment, as if he was hesitating. He stood there and thought for a moment. Finally, Jianqin clenched his teeth and took out a large wooden bucket that he had prepared beforehand from his spatial belt. He gently placed it on the ground, then took out the large gourds filled with the silver-striped golden snake's blood one by one and poured all of the blood into the wooden bucket. Now, Jianqin planned to cultivate the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body in the wilderness. This was because the silver-striped golden snake's blood gave off a bloody smell that was simply inconvenient for him to use in a city with a lot of people. Very quickly, the blood in the large gourds was all poured into the wooden bucket by Jianqin. The 200+ kilograms of blood almost filled the wooden bucket that was half the height of a person. A thick and pungent, bloody smell wafted out from the wooden bucket and hovered in the air for a long time without dispersing. With so much blood gathered together, the bloody smell was even thicker. It was so suffocating that Jianqin felt as if he couldn't breathe. The blood of some special magical beasts was completely different from the blood of ordinary magical beasts. The silver-striped golden snake's blood was exactly this. Chapter 101. Plop! Jianqin took off his clothes and jumped into the wooden barrel filled with the silver-striped golden snake's blood. At the same time, he took out the snake's gallbladder from the jade bottle and swallowed it. Not long after the snake's gallbladder entered his stomach, Jianqin immediately felt his insides churn. His stomach began to rumble uncontrollably, as if he was about to have diarrhea. Jianqin sat cross-legged in the wooden barrel. The silver-striped golden snake's blood had already submerged up to his neck, leaving only his head exposed. Feeling the cold aura coming from the blood, Jianqin slowly calmed down. Closing his eyes, he began to absorb the special factor contained within the blood according to the method described in the book. The silver-striped golden snake's blood contained a special factor, and it was precisely because of this special factor that his blood possessed the ability to detoxify. According to the book, if one wanted to cultivate the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body, they would have to absorb the special factor contained within the silver-striped golden snake's blood into one's body, then fuse it with one's own blood. Finally, the blood would nourish one's body, allowing one's blood and body to possess an extremely strong poison resistance. Once the silver-striped golden snake's blood was used to cultivate the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body, one would be immune to poisons that were weaker than the silver-striped golden snake's poison. Even if one were to encounter poisons that were on par with the silver-striped golden snake, although they would not be immune, they would still possess an extremely strong resistance, minimizing the damage done to the body by the poison or delaying the spread of the poison. Although the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body did not allow one to be immune to all poisons in the world, it was still enough to move Jianshin's heart. After all, in the Tianyuan continent, the silver-striped golden snake's poison was renowned throughout the world. If one were to talk about poisons that were stronger than the silver-striped golden snake, they would definitely be counted on one hand. Moreover, these poisons were extremely rare, just as rare as the silver-striped golden snake. Jianshin sat cross-legged in the wooden barrel with his eyes closed. His stomach was constantly rumbling, and the sound was extremely loud. If someone were to stand beside Jianshin, they would be able to clearly hear the sound coming from his stomach. Inside Jianshin's stomach, it was like a surging sea, extremely unsettled. At the same time, an extremely nauseous feeling came from the bottom of Jianshin's heart, causing Jianshin almost could not help but want to vomit. I guess the gallbladder of the snake was melted, and the bile inside leaked out. Jianshin resisted the nausea from the bottom of his heart as he thought to himself. According to the introduction in the book, if one wanted to cultivate the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body, the most important thing was the gallbladder. The gallbladder and blood were both essential items because the special factors in the blood that could resist poisons were all guided by the gallbladder. Only then could these factors be absorbed into the body. These factors in the blood were not the energy of the world that could be absorbed at will. If one did not have a corresponding guiding factor, then even if one had blood, they would not be able to absorb these factors. Although directly drinking blood could also detoxify the poison, it was only a temporary solution. It would not last long. Just urinating would cause these factors to be excreted, let alone cultivating the 10,000 poisons impenetrable body. At this moment, a warm current suddenly appeared in Jianshin's abdomen, and the temperature continued to increase. In a short moment, Jianshin's abdomen became hot, as if there was a fire burning inside. Following the sudden change in his abdomen, Jianshin's pores all over his body seemed to be affected and all opened up. At the same time, in the bright red blood in the wooden barrel, a trace of strange and special energy was like a small fish slowly swimming into his body through the pores all over his body. Just as this energy entered Jianshin's body, Jianshin's originally calm expression suddenly changed. The strange energy that entered his body instantly changed from a docile little sheep to a group of ferocious tigers, madly wreaking havoc in Jianshin's body, causing him to feel intense pain all over his body. Crap, this actually contains the berserk element that is unique to magical beasts, and it's even stronger than the berserk element in monster cores. Feeling the changes in his body, Jianshin instantly understood what was going on. The energy of magical beasts all contained berserk elements. This was not a secret in the Tianyuan continent. However, these berserk elements were almost always hidden within monster cores. What Jianshin did not expect was that the blood of the silver-striped golden snake actually contained berserk elements as well, and this berserk element was several times stronger than when he absorbed the energy from monster cores to cultivate. Forcefully enduring the intense pain from his body, Jianshin's mind once again had an extremely bewildering thought. Why didn't I feel this berserk element when I drank the blood of the silver-striped golden snake? Sitting in the wooden barrel, Jianshin's body began to tremble slightly. The intense pain that came from every single pore of his body caused the muscles on Jianshin's face to twitch uncontrollably, and his originally rosy complexion began to gradually turn white. The strands of strange and special energy contained within the blood of the silver-striped golden snake seemed to be attracted by something, and unceasingly surged into every pore of Jianshin's body. As the energy that entered his body continuously increased, the berserk element contained within also became more and more numerous, becoming more and more powerful. The pain that this berserk element brought to his body caused Jianchen to be covered in sweat, but he still clenched his teeth and endured it. At this moment, the two spots of light within Jianchen's dantian, one purple and one green, suddenly emitted a layer of weak purple and green light. At the same time, the intense pain that came from all over Jianchen's body suddenly disappeared without a trace. The berserk element that had been absorbed along with the strange energy within the blood of the silver-striped golden snake seemed to have received an indescribable suction force. As soon as it entered Jianchen's body, it immediately surged towards the two spots of light within Jianchen's dantian. This sudden change caused Jianchen's expression to be slightly stunned. However, when he understood what was going on, he immediately let out a sigh of relief. Jianchen also knew that in the past, every time he absorbed the energy within the monster core for cultivation, the berserk element contained within the monster core would be absorbed by the two spots of light within his dantian. Therefore, he did not find the current situation strange. Without the berserk element tormenting his body, Jianchen's expression that was filled with pain immediately relaxed. However, Jianchen did not relax in the slightest because of this. He immediately calmed his heart and observed the situation within his body. He saw that when the special element that had been absorbed from the blood of the silver-striped golden snake had just entered his body, the berserk element contained within immediately separated and was absorbed by the two spots of light within his dantian. As for the remaining harmless special element, it slowly gathered towards the snake gallbladder in his abdomen and finally gathered around the snake gallbladder. The speed at which the special element was absorbed from the blood of the silver-striped golden snake was extremely slow. Jianchen stayed in the wooden barrel for an entire day and night before finally completely absorbing the special element contained within the blood into his body. At this moment, within Jianchen's abdomen, the snake gallbladder had already gathered a thick layer of the strange element. After an entire day and night of absorption, due to the essence within the blood being completely absorbed, not only did the color of the blood within the wooden barrel become much lighter, the originally surging stench of blood also disappeared without a trace. Chapter 102. Now, there was only one step left to achieve the body of 10,000 poisons. At the same time, it was also the most important step. Whether or not he could successfully achieve the body of 10,000 poisons all depended on this last step. Now, the most important special factor in the silver-striped golden snake's blood had been completely absorbed by Jianchen. It had gathered around the snake gallbladder in his abdomen, forming a strange substance. This strange substance was the anti-poison substance. The reason why the silver-striped golden snake's blood could cure all poisons was completely because of the patterned strange anti-poison substance. Now, Jianchen only needed to completely absorb the anti-poison substance from the silver-striped golden snake's blood into his own blood according to the contents of the book. It would perfectly merge with his blood, and the body of 10,000 poisons would be successfully achieved. As long as the anti-poison substance was perfectly merged into his blood, not only would it give his blood the ability to detoxify poisons, but as the blood continued to circulate in his body, even his physical body would gradually be transformed by the blood. It would become a body with super strong anti-poison properties. It would even be directly immune to some weaker poisons, preventing them from causing any harm to the body. Jianchen's expression became serious. Now was not only the last step, but also the most critical moment. This was because the strange anti-poison substance was completely attracted to the snake gallbladder and gathered in his body. Without the snake gallbladder, the anti-poison substance would immediately dissipate. Now, Jianchen had to merge the anti-poison substance around the snake gallbladder into his blood before it was digested. Jianchen concentrated and used his mind to control the flow of the strange substance around the snake gallbladder. However, just as the strange substance left the snake gallbladder, there seemed to be a suction force from the snake gallbladder, firmly sucking in the strange substance that Jianchen had separated with his mind. Seeing this, Jianchen gritted his teeth and immediately increased the control of his mind. Although Jianchen's current strength was very weak, his strength was unquestionable. After he increased the control of his mind, the strange substance was finally successfully separated. Then, under Jianchen's control, it merged into his blood. However, as soon as it fused with the blood, it immediately separated from the blood. This strange factor and the blood were like two opposite magnets. The two were so incompatible with each other that they couldn't fuse at all. Jianchen did not show the slightest sign of discouragement. He once again increased the control of his mind and forcibly merged the strange substance into his blood. Then his powerful mind stood guard at the side. If the strange substance showed signs of leaving his blood, his mind would immediately surge forward and forcibly merge the strange substance into his blood again. As the blood continued to flow through the blood vessels in his body, the strange substance that Jianchen had forcibly merged into his blood was finally slowly assimilated into his blood. The part of his blood that had assimilated the strange substance actually had a bit of a light green color. However, this light green color was soon melted by the surging blood around him. After assimilating this small part of the strange energy, Jianchen could clearly feel that the blood in his body seemed to have undergone a slight change. He felt that there seemed to be something extra in it. After assimilating this small part of the strange energy, Jianchen did not know how much time had passed. However, a part of the snake bile in his body had been reduced. Jianchen knew that the bile could not exist in his body for a long time. Therefore, without a moment of hesitation, he immediately separated another part of the strange energy from the snake bile and merged it into his blood in the same way as before. This process repeated for an unknown number of times. Jianchen did not know how much time had passed. When he successfully merged the last bit of the strange energy into his blood, the snake bile in his body had almost dissipated. Feeling the obvious changes in his blood, Jianchen let out a long sigh of relief. A feeling of excitement spontaneously rose from the bottom of his heart, causing a trace of happiness and excitement to appear on Jianchen's face. Invulnerable poison body. I never thought that I would actually be able to cultivate the invulnerable poison body. Jianchen screamed from the bottom of his heart. With the 20 years of memories of the Jianghu from his previous life, he knew that the Tianyuan continent was much more dangerous than the Jianghu from his previous life. An invulnerable poison body would bring him great benefits. At the very least, if someone were to set him up in the future, he would not have to worry about food and drink. However, Jianchen was even more clear in his heart that although he had cultivated the invulnerable poison body, it was still in the initial stages. He had not yet reached the perfect invulnerable poison body. His blood had just merged with the poison resistance factor that he had refined from the silver-striped golden snake's blood. However, this fusion was still in the initial stages. He still needed a few days of buffer before he could achieve a perfect fusion. After the blood and the poison resistance factor had perfectly fused, the blood would constantly circulate in his body, gradually transforming his skin, flesh, tendons, bones, and internal organs. No matter if it was his skin, flesh, tendons, bones, organs, or internal organs, as well as the large and small meridians in his body, they would all possess the ability to resist poison. This was the true invulnerable poison body. Jianchen slowly opened his eyes. What entered his eyes was a sea of light. At the end of the horizon in the east, a fiery red sun had just peeked out. Looking at the color of the sky, it was actually early in the morning. The sun had just risen. Jianchen flipped over and jumped out of the wooden barrel filled with blood. He then took out a towel from his space belt and wiped the blood off his body. He then put on the clothes that had been placed beside the wooden barrel. After soaking in the water for a period of time, the blood in the barrel had already decreased by a quarter. The originally overpowering smell of blood had also completely disappeared. Not only that, even the original bright red color of the blood had become a little dull. Looking at the blood in the barrel, Gentian immediately kicked the barrel fiercely, causing it to topple to the ground. Immediately, the silver-striped, golden snake's blood spilled onto the ground. Although the silver-striped, golden snake's blood was incomparably precious, all of the essence in the blood had been absorbed by Gentian. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe the remaining blood as ordinary water. There was simply no use for him at all. After returning to Wake City, Gentian directly went to a restaurant. After ordering a few dishes, he began to eat. After not eating for an entire day and night, Gentian's stomach was starting to feel a little hungry. Right now was the peak period for eating, so the restaurant was very lively. There was an endless stream of people going in and out. Very quickly, the tables were filled. The restaurant's waiter was running around busily, continuously serving plate after plate of fragrant and delicious dishes. Chapter 103. Little brother, the seats here are all taken. I wonder if I can sit with you. At this moment, a deep voice came from beside Gentian. Hearing this, Gentian raised his head slightly and saw a middle-aged man standing across the table with a smile on his face. His eyes were full of kindness. The middle-aged man was about 40 years old and wore a green robe. However, Gentian's sharp eyes could see that the robe was made of coarse cloth and belonged to a very cheap type. The middle-aged man had short black hair that was about an inch long. His appearance was ordinary and belonged to the very ordinary type. However, the kindness in his eyes was not something that could be faked casually. Gentian smiled and nodded, saying, "Since the tables in the restaurant are all taken, and I don't need such a big seat, I should share it with everyone. Please take a seat. If that's the case, then thank you very much, little brother." The middle-aged man laughed heartily and cupped his hands at Gentian. Then he did not stand on ceremony and directly pulled out a chair and sat down. "Young man, give me a caddy of white wine and a caddy of high-quality horse meat." As soon as he sat down, the middle-aged man opened his mouth and called out, "Okay, please wait a moment." The restaurant waiter answered from afar. Gentian's gaze stayed on the middle-aged man's face for a while. Then he ignored him and ate his own food. The middle-aged man looked at Gentian again and laughed. "Little brother, how should I address you?" "Gentian." Gentian chewed the meat in big mouthfuls and said with a slightly muffled voice, "Gentian, hee, that's a nice name." The middle-aged man looked up and down at Gentian and then asked again, "Little brother Gentian, you must also be a mercenary, right?" Gentian nodded. "That's right. Due to the limitations of my strength, I'm currently only a D-rank mercenary of the lowest level." The level of a mercenary was related to their own strength and the success rate of completing missions. The lowest D-rank mercenaries were usually rookies who had just advanced to the Saint Realm. However, among the D-rank mercenaries, there were still some who did not have talent in cultivation and had not condensed a holy weapon. Although the middle-aged man opposite him showed a very kind attitude, Gentian did not reveal his exact strength. The middle-aged man smiled in an unconcerned manner. "Little brother, you don't seem to be more than 20 years old. To be able to condense a holy weapon and become a saint at such a young age, your future is limitless." The middle-aged man spoke with sincerity. However, just when he reached there, the middle-aged man suddenly sighed and continued, "Back then, I only managed to condense a holy weapon when I was 25 years old and broke through to the Saint Realm. Little brother, you've actually reached the Saint Realm at the age of 20. I think that in the near future, another talented Earth Saint Master will appear on the Tian Yuan continent." When he mentioned the words Earth Saint Master, the middle-aged man's face was filled with yearning. Gentian could not help but look at the middle-aged man again. He had developed a rather good impression of the middle-aged man, but that was it. Condensing a holy weapon at the age of 25 was indeed mediocre on the Tian Yuan continent. People like that would basically end up at the level of Great Saint Master. If they did not come across any fortuitous encounters, they would probably never be able to break through to Earth Saint Master. After all, there was an extremely difficult gap between Great Saint Master and Earth Saint Master. This gap was hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of times more difficult than condensing a holy weapon to become a saint. This was because breaking through from Great Saint Master to Earth Saint Master could lead to eternal damnation if one did not pay attention. In the best-case scenario, one would be heavily injured and lose all their cultivation, becoming a cripple for the rest of their lives. In the worst-case scenario, one would directly die. The gap between Great Saint Master and Earth Saint Master was one of life and death. On the Tianyuan continent, there were many people with mediocre talent who would stop at Great Saint Master for the rest of their lives. It was impossible for them to break through to Earth Saint Master, and there were many people who died at this step. There was only a 1% chance of breaking through to Earth Saint Master from Great Saint Master. Jianchen understood this extremely well. This was because he had read about it both in the library of the academy and in the library of the Changyang prefecture. Brother, you probably haven't joined the mercenary group yet, right? The middle-aged man smiled at Jianchen. Jianchen's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He had already guessed what the middle-aged man was going to do next, but he still nodded. That's right. Little brother, why don't you join our flame mercenaries? Although our flame mercenaries is a small, mediocre mercenary group, the people inside are extremely kind. A sliver of anticipation appeared in the middle-aged man's eyes. Previously, he had never thought of joining any mercenary group. In his opinion, no matter which mercenary group he joined, it would only be a burden to him. Not only would it limit his ability to display his abilities, it would also be a great hindrance to his growth. After all, if he wanted to increase his strength quickly, the only way was to absorb the energy within the monster cores. And the amount of monster cores required was an extremely large number. If he entered the magical beast mountain range alone to hunt magical beasts, then all the harvests would naturally belong to him. That way, he could barely keep up with the rate at which he consumed the monster cores. But if he were to join a mercenary group, although it would be easier for him to hunt magical beasts, the distribution of monster cores would become a problem. It could be said that if Jianchen were to join a mercenary group, unless he were to act alone, the distribution of monster cores would not be as good as if he were to hunt magical beasts alone. Seeing Jianchen fall into thought, the middle-aged man did not give up at all. He continued, Brother Jianchen, our flame mercenary group is only a small mercenary group, so we don't have any restrictions on our members. We're not like those large mercenary groups where the various rules and regulations are enough to give people a headache. If you join our mercenary group, it'll be easier and easier for everyone to earn money. After all, you should know that hunting magical beasts is an extremely profitable business, and monster cores can be sold for quite a good price. At the same time, cultivating Saint Force is also essential. Even the corpses of magical beasts are purchased at high prices by the various restaurants. As the saying goes, there's strength in numbers. Once we have more people, even if it's a high-rank magical beast, we can still kill it. Just think about it. Once we successfully kill a high-rank magical beast, I'm sure you know how much profit there is. Reaching there, the middle-aged man paused and stared at Jianchen before continuing. If you're alone, you might be able to deal with a few low-class magical beasts, but they won't be able to be sold for much money. In the end, you'll have to expend a lot of effort to kill them. Perhaps the money you'll get from selling them won't even be enough to pay for your treatment. Moreover, we can't rule out the possibility of powerful magical beasts or groups of magical beasts attacking you. Do you think you can deal with the pursuit of several or even several dozen magical beasts? That's impossible. In the end, you'll just lose your life for nothing. Chapter 104. Seeing that Jianchen remained silent, the middle-aged man once again tried to entice him. Little brother Jianchen, you can rest assured regarding the distribution of benefits. Although our flame mercenary group is only a small mercenary group that has only been established a few years ago, the brothers in the group are all true men. We value the friendship between brothers more than money. Once we gain something, we won't mistreat you no matter if you contributed or not. The middle-aged man did not continue speaking at this point. He had already said everything he needed to say. The rest was up to Genshin. Genshin furrowed his brow in thought for a long while. Many factors flashed through his mind at lightning speed. In the end, he gritted his teeth and a resolute light flashed through his eyes. He said, "All right, I can join your mercenary group, but I have to make things clear first. I won't be bound by any restrictions in the mercenary group. I have the right to not listen to anyone. If I want to leave the mercenary group in the future, you can't stop me for any reason." The middle-aged man looked at Genshin and asked doubtfully, "Little brother Genshin, don't you want to find out about the strength of our flame mercenary group and whether we have any enemies? You have to know that if our flame mercenary group has a powerful enemy, it will definitely bring you a lot of trouble if you join us. You might even be in danger of losing your life." Genshin chuckled and said without a care, "If I'm so cowardly when doing things, how am I supposed to make a name for myself in the world? Since I've decided to join your mercenary group, these factors aren't within the scope of consideration at all." The middle-aged man laughed heartily. "Good, good, good. Little brother Genshin, I couldn't tell that you're a good man at such a young age. There are no problems with the conditions you just mentioned. We're only a small, mediocre mercenary group anyway. The purpose of our existence is to earn some money. As for the brothers in the group, we won't restrict them at all. They can leave whenever they want." "That's great." Genshin nodded in satisfaction. The middle-aged man suddenly said, "Oh, right. I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm called Kendall, and I'm also the leader of the Flame Mercenaries. Little brother Genshin, if you don't mind, you can call me Uncle Kendall. I'm not used to those titles of leader and leader." Kendall chuckled towards the end. "All right, then I'll call you Uncle Kendall from now on." Genshin had a good impression of the middle-aged man in front of him. He was forthright and was a man worth befriending. After that, Genshin and Kendall finished their meal and left for the mercenary guild to complete the relevant procedures. The procedures for joining a mercenary group were very simple. They completed the procedures very quickly, and Genshin officially joined the Flame Mercenaries. "Genshin, let's go. I'll take you to our temporary gathering point and introduce you to our other brothers." With that, Kendall led the way and led Genshin into the mercenary guild. Along the way, Kendall constantly introduced Genshin to some matters of the Flame Mercenaries, allowing Genshin to gradually gain a better understanding of the Flame Mercenaries. The Flame Mercenaries was a small mercenary group that had been established for less than 5 years. Since the mercenaries had been established, the members of the Flame Mercenaries had basically always hunted magical beasts in the magical beast forest to earn money. They rarely took on mercenary missions. As a result, the Flame Mercenaries were still at the DJ rank when they first registered. They hadn't improved at all. Including Kendall, there were a total of 8 members in the Flame Mercenaries. With the addition of Genshin today, the number of members had increased from 8 to 9. According to Captain Kendall's introduction, among the 9 members, other than him who had the strength of a beginner Saint Master, 5 of the others had the strength of a great saint, while the remaining 3 were still at the saint realm. At this point, Kendall suddenly slapped his forehead and turned to look at Genshin. He smiled and said, "Right, little brother Genshin, I still don't know what kind of strength you possess now." Even though Kendall had already guessed that Genshin would only possess the strength of a saint at such a young age, this was only his own guess. He didn't dare to rashly jump to conclusions before he received a definite answer from Genshin. Genshin chuckled and didn't say anything. He directly took out the mercenary badge that represented his identity from his spatial belt. This was the badge that Genshin had obtained when he first registered. It was a D-rank mercenary badge. Kendall's expression didn't change in the slightest when he saw the badge's grade. He smiled and said, "Now that our Flame Mercenaries have another saint, we're even stronger than before. I'm sure it'll be easier for us to hunt magical beasts." Jianqin followed Kendall for the time it took for a stick of incense to burn before finally arriving in front of a commoner's house made of crushed stones. This commoner's house didn't look very big from the outside. The eaves were already covered in spider webs, and the walls had traces of wind and frost left behind by the passage of time. It was clear that this commoner's house had existed in Wake City for many years, and no one had taken care of it. Kendall arrived in front of the door and lightly knocked. Not long after, the wooden door opened and a head with dark skin poked out. This was the face of a youth. From his appearance, he seemed to be around 26 or 27 years old. He had a skinny and ordinary face and was the type that could be casually picked out in a crowd. When the skinny youth saw Kendall, he immediately smiled and said, "Uncle Kendall, I guessed that you'd be back." Afterwards, Jianqin followed Kendall into the house. The lighting in the house was a bit dim, but that didn't affect Jianqin's vision. Jianqin swept his gaze across the house and took in everything inside. The interior of the house wasn't very big and the decorations were very simple. Apart from a few mattresses that took up half of the space, there was only a table and a few stools. It could be said that it was very simple and crude. On the mattresses on the floor, a few people were lazily drinking wine with bored expressions. However, when Leader Kendall entered, everyone's attention was focused on Leader Kendall. Come, brothers, let me introduce you. This is little brother Jianqin. He has just joined our flame mercenaries. Little brother Jianqin is the youngest among us, so please take care of him in the future." As soon as he entered the house, Kendall pulled Jianqin aside and loudly introduced him to everyone. Chapter 105. Everyone in the room immediately shifted their gazes from Captain Kendall to Jianqin. However, when they saw Jianqin's young face, quite a few of them were surprised. However, Jianqin's compliment still left quite a few people with a good impression of him. After all, the first impression was extremely important when strangers met for the first time. "Little brother Jianqin, your name should be Jianqin, right? Come, sit down. No matter how old you are, since you've joined our flame mercenaries, we're all brothers in the future. We'll share our joys and sorrows. If anyone bullies you in the future, feel free to come find me." A burly man climbed up from the mattress on the floor and arrived before Jianqin. He placed his right hand on Jianqin's shoulder intimately and pulled him to a chair to sit down. Jianqin smiled. "May I know your name, big brother?" As he spoke, Jianqin studied the man before him. The man was extremely burly. His upper body was bare and his sturdy muscles bulged. He seemed to be in his 30s. Even though the room was dim, Jianqin could still clearly see that the man's skin was rather dark, making him seem like a completely black man. His bare upper body was covered in terrifying wounds. Judging from the scars, they should have been caused by ferocious magical beasts. He could tell with a single glance that the man had fought against magical beasts many times. "I'm Hoopa, little brother Jianqin. If you don't mind, you can call me big brother Hoopa in the future. I'm older than you anyway, so you won't lose out even if you call me big brother." The man chuckled as he sat beside Jianqin and poured some water for Jianqin. "All right then, I'll call you big brother Hoopa in the future." Jianqin chuckled. At this time, the person who was originally lying on the floor and drinking wine slowly got up. "Little brother Jianqin, let me introduce you." Captain Kendall came to Jianqin's side and pointed at the other people in the room as he introduced them to Jianqin. Apart from Jianqin and Captain Kendall, there were 6 other people in the house. All of them were men in their 30s or 40s. What surprised Jianqin was that there was a pair of twin brothers named Zhou Dakai and Zhou Shaokai. They were 28 years old and both had the strength of a primary great saint. They looked exactly the same. If it wasn't for the scar on one of them's forehead, it was really hard to tell which twin was the older one and which was the younger one. Other than Hoopa, who was 32 years old and was a beginner great saint, the remaining 4 were called Yun Xian, Xiao Dao, and Chang Ningfeng. Yun Xian was very tall but very skinny. He looked like a scholar. He was 25 years old and possessed the strength of a mid-level saint. Xiao Dao was short and his skinny frame was like a skeleton. He looked much thinner than Yun Xian. Xiao Dao was the youngest person in the Flame Mercenaries aside from Genshin. He was only 22 years old and possessed the strength of a mid-level saint. Chang Yingfeng was a young man who looked very calm. He was 2 years younger than Hupa, just 30 years old. However, he was a bit stronger than Hupa as he was a mid-level great saint. Genshin, our Flame Mercenaries, only have these few people. The other two went to the market to buy things. "I'm sure they'll be back soon," said Captain Kendall. "Our Flame Mercenaries have an operation tomorrow. All the brothers in the group have to go. Little brother Genshin, I wonder if you'll be participating in tomorrow's operation? Our group doesn't have that many broken rules. If you don't want to participate, no one will force you. It's completely voluntary." "Operation? What kind of operation?" Genshin blinked and asked in confusion. Captain Kendall rolled his eyes at Genshin before grabbing the jug of alcohol on the table and taking a large gulp. Only then did he say, "What else can we do?" "Of course, we're going to the mountain range of magical beasts to hunt magical beasts. After all, I established the Flame Mercenaries to gather a few more people to hunt magical beasts. With our current strength, we can only make some money from hunting magical beasts and selling magic cores. Of course I'm going, since we're going to hunt magical beasts. What reason do I have to not go?" Genshin chuckled and immediately agreed. "Little brother Genshin, don't worry. Although you're not very strong, as long as our group has any gains, you'll get a share. If your contributions are great, we'll even distribute more benefits according to your contributions." The one who spoke was Hupa. "Genshin, the environment in the mountain range of magical beasts is extremely vile. Moreover, this operation will be extremely dangerous. If we come across a Class 3 magical beast that even the captain and big brothers can't defeat, it's very likely that we'll lose our lives. So, Genshin, you should reconsider." The person who spoke this time was actually Xiao Dao, who was not much older than Genshin. Xiao Dao stared at Genshin with shining eyes. His face was filled with sincerity, and his voice was slightly solemn. He was sincerely reminding Genshin. Hearing Xiao Dao's words, the faces of the other people in the room became rather solemn. In particular, Class 3 magical beasts placed quite a bit of pressure on them. Although Captain Kendall was a beginner Saint Master, he could only protect himself if he came across a Class 3 magical beast. After all, magical beasts of the same level were often much stronger than humans of the same level. On the Tianyuan continent, it was basically impossible for a person to kill a magical beast of the same level or stronger without an extremely high-level cultivation technique or powerful battle skill. Moreover, Saint Force had to be of an attribute. Otherwise, the only option left was to flee. On the other hand, although Captain Kendall was a beginner Saint Master, his Saint Force did not have an attribute. His attacks were much weaker than Saint Force with an attribute. Although he could put up a fight against a regular Class 3 magical beast, he could only protect himself. If he came across a powerful Class 3 magical beast that excelled in speed, even Captain Kendall would find it very difficult to escape. In the end, he would only end up as food for the magical beast. However, no one in the room noticed the faint disdain in Genshin's eyes when he heard about Class 3 magical beasts. Back when he was only a beginner great saint, he had already begun hunting Class 3 magical beasts. It could be said that regular Class 3 magical beasts were no threat to Genshin at all, unless he encountered something strange like the golden-striped silver snake. But now Genshin's strength had reached the level of a mid-great saint. He was much more powerful than a beginner great saint. In other words, Genshin was completely capable of taking on several Class 3 magical beasts by himself. Chapter 106. P.S. There was no electricity at home for an entire day yesterday, so I was unable to write or update. This chapter basically makes up for yesterday's. There's one more chapter for today, but it's rather late. Afterwards, Genshin began to chat with the members of the Flame Mercenaries. They all talked about some of the interesting things they had seen and heard on the Tianyuan continent in the past few years. Genshin's relationship with the members of the Flame Mercenaries had become much closer unknowingly. However, it was worth mentioning that the members of the Flame Mercenaries, including Captain Kendall, were all straightforward and loyal people. Although Genshin had only revealed the insignia of a D-class mercenary group to them, they did not look down on Genshin because of that. On the Tianyuan continent, where strength was respected, people like that were rare. As a result, Genshin's impression of the Flame Mercenaries immediately improved. Unknowingly, it was already noon. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. It must be Kabutis and the others. A sliver of joy appeared in Xiao Dao's eyes when he heard the knock. He immediately went to open the door. Genshin looked outside as well. He knew that the other two members of the Flame Mercenaries had probably returned. The door opened and two clothed people walked in. One of them seemed to be a young man in his 30s. He had a medium build, around the same height as Genshin. His bright eyes flickered with interest. The other person was a middle-aged man. From his appearance, he seemed to be around the same age as Captain Kendall. A gleam of light would flash through his indifferent eyes from time to time. "Kabutis, dear, you've finally returned." Captain Kendall smiled. "Come, let me introduce you. This is Genshin, a new member of our Flame Mercenaries. We'll all be brothers in the future, so we have to take care of each other." Afterward, Kendall looked at Genshin and said, "Brother Genshin, that young man is called Kabutis. He's not very powerful, but he's the smartest person in our mercenaries. Almost all of the decisions we make are made by Kabutis. The other person, who's around my age, is Deer. He's also the most powerful person in our mercenaries. He's a high-level Great Saint. I believe he'll be able to break through to Great Saint in 2 or 3 years and become a Saint Master." Afterward, Genshin, Kabutis, and Deer exchanged some pleasantries with one another. They basically got to know one another. "Genshin, I see that you're around 20 years old. I wonder what kind of strength you possess now." Kabutis stared at Genshin with bright eyes, his tone filled with curiosity. Genshin smiled and didn't give a direct answer. Instead, he took out a mercenary badge from his spatial belt and said with a smile, "I became AD rank mercenary not long ago." "Oh." Kabutis nodded slightly. He took a deep look at Genshin, a trace of undetectable contemplation in his eyes. He then took off his spatial belt and handed it to Captain Kendall. "Uncle Kendall, I've already prepared everything we need. We're just waiting for tomorrow to set off." Captain Kendall took the spatial belt from Kabutis and said, "Good. Now that all the supplies have been prepared, let's set off tomorrow morning. This time, we'll have to slaughter a few more magical beasts. Brother Genshin, do you have any objections?" "No, I'll just follow Uncle Kendall's arrangements." Genshin said with a smile, "All right, then let's all have a good rest today and recover our energy. We'll prepare for a big fight tomorrow." After leaving the small house, Genshin strolled around Wacker by himself. Genshin didn't care about tomorrow's battle at all. With the Flame Mercenary Group's strength, if they wanted to easily kill magical beasts without suffering any casualties, they could only choose rank 2 magical beasts. As for rank 3 magical beasts, although the Flame Mercenary Group had 1 Saint Master and 4 Great Saint Masters, it was still a bit of a stretch for them to deal with rank 3 magical beasts. Moreover, regardless of whether the Flame Mercenary Group was hunting rank 2 or 3 magical beasts, they wouldn't be able to pose a threat to Genshin unless they encountered a rank 4 magical beast. Moreover, even if they did encounter a rank 4 magical beast, although Genshin wouldn't be able to defeat it, he still had a bit of confidence in escaping. Therefore, Genshin didn't feel the slightest bit of pressure for tomorrow's trip to the magical beast mountain range. After discussing with the other members of the Flame Mercenary Group about tomorrow's gathering time, Genshin used the excuse of replenishing his supplies as an excuse to leave the dark house and stroll around Wacker City by himself. Although Genshin had already been in Wacker City for a few days, most of his time was spent hiding in the magical Beast Mountain Range. The amount of time he truly spent in the city was probably only around 10 days. Moreover, most of these 10 days were spent cultivating. It could be said that he didn't have any time to play. Therefore, taking advantage of his free time, Genshin planned to take a good stroll around Wacker City. Although Wacker City didn't cover a large area, it still covered an area of several hundred kilometers. The entire city was surrounded by a layer of thick and tall city walls. If an ordinary person hurried along, it would take several hours to walk from the east to the west of the city. Due to Wacker City's geographical advantage and its proximity to the magical Beast Mountain Range, the city was bustling with activity almost every day. There were many people moving about, and almost a third of Wacker City's area was occupied by private restaurants. As Genshin strolled along the main street, his curious gaze constantly swept past the stalls on both sides of the street. Almost all of the stall owners were mercenaries. Of course, there were also a few merchants. Aside from a few strange items, there were also some herbs, monster cores, and so on. However, most of these monster cores were of the first class. There were very few second-class monster cores, so they didn't attract Genshin's attention at all. Although there were many monster core buyers on the Tianyuan continent, if mercenaries sold their monster cores to these buyers, they would only be able to get around 70% of the original value of the monster core. As a result, many mercenaries would rather sell their monster cores at a lower price than the market price. As a result, there were many mercenaries who would set up their own stalls to sell their monster cores. Even so, as everyone on the Tianyuan continent needed monster cores, there were still many rich people who would spend money to buy monster cores from these mercenaries. As a result, the stalls that sold monster cores were always surrounded by people bargaining with the stall owners. Just as Genshin was leisurely strolling along the street, the purple and green spots of light in his dantian suddenly began to violently pulsate. With the pulsation of these two spots of light, Genshin's dantian was greatly affected. The originally calm lake surface instantly became turbulent. Even the saint force in his body was almost out of Genshin's control. Chapter 107. Within Genshin's dantian, the two spots of light, one purple and one green, were constantly flickering and pulsating. Circles of purple and green halos were constantly emitted from these two spots of light, forming a visible radiance that spread throughout his dantian. At the same time, Genshin's mind suddenly had a strange feeling. At this moment, the two spots of light in Genshin's mind seemed to have become sentient beings with their own independent thoughts. This was because suddenly, Genshin could inexplicably feel that the two spots of light were emitting an enormous feeling of joy and excitement. Yes, Genshin could actually feel that the two spots of light in his dantian were displaying an abnormal state due to great joy and excitement. However, after knowing this conclusion, Genshin was flabbergasted. It was so unbelievable, and in Genshin's eyes, one could see a lifeless expression. At this moment, a strange feeling suddenly entered Genshin's mind, as if it had appeared out of thin air in his mind. This was because at this moment, Genshin could clearly feel that the two spots of light in his dantian, one purple and one green, seemed to have established a subtle connection with something. This kind of connection was somewhat similar to a spiritual connection, but also seemed to have locked onto something. This kind of feeling, Genshin could actually clearly feel it. Genshin forcibly suppressed the shock in his heart, took a deep breath, and then slightly turned his head, following this inexplicable feeling that suddenly appeared in his mind. He raised his eyes and looked towards a street stall not far from him. The owner of the street stall was a young man of about 30 years of age. In front of the young man, there were a few rank, one magic nuclei, and a few strange things on the street stall. Genshin's gaze was fixed on a fist-sized white stone placed in the corner of the street stall. The white stone was in an irregular shape, completely white, and looked completely unremarkable. It was simply no different from an ordinary stone. Because of the inexplicable feeling that suddenly appeared in his mind, Jianqin was very clear in his heart that this seemingly unremarkable white stone had caused the 2 spots of light in his dantian to move. This was because within the 2 spots of light, there was an extremely weak spiritual connection tightly locked onto the white stone, just like a child tightly hugging his favorite treasure. Moreover, the excitement and joy that came from the heart could even be clearly felt by Jianqin. Jianqin's expression did not change as he slowly walked to the street stall, squatting down, and reached out to grab the fist-sized white stone. Just as he was about to use his strength to pick it up, his expression became slightly serious, and his eyes revealed a trace of surprise. This strange white stone that was only the size of a fist was surprisingly heavy. When he picked it up, the strange white stone actually did not budge at all. What a heavy stone! Jianqin couldn't help but exclaim. Then his right hand clasped the white stone tightly. With a sudden force, he finally lifted the stone slowly. "Little brother, are you interested in this strange stone?" At this time, the stall owner said to Jianqin with a smile. Jianqin slowly took this strange white stone in front of his eyes and looked at it carefully. Although this white stone was only the size of a fist, its weight was a terrifying 100 pounds. If Jianqin's strength had not reached the intermediate level of Great Saint, even if he wanted to pick it up with one hand, it would be very difficult for him to do so. And just when Jianqin picked up this strange white stone, he could clearly feel that the excitement and joy from the purple and green light spots in his dantian were getting stronger and stronger. For this, Jianqin also felt very puzzled and incredible because only intelligent creatures with life could transmit such emotions. At this moment, such emotions appeared in the purple and green light spots in his dantian. Could it be that these 2 light spots also have their own consciousness, or they already have the ability to think independently? When Jianqin came to this conclusion, he couldn't help but tremble. Fine sweat beads appeared on his forehead, and he felt that he could not control his future. But then he let out a helpless sigh in his heart because Jianqin really couldn't do anything about the purple and green light spots in his dantian. There was no way to get rid of them. These 2 light spots were not in Jianqin's control at all. Even if he wanted to get rid of them, he didn't have the ability to do so. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. Forget it, I don't care about them. Anyway, I've already died once. What else can I not let go of? At most, I'll just die again. Jianqin thought secretly in his heart. Then he stopped thinking about the purple and green light spots. Instead, he looked at the white stone in front of him seriously. The white stone was made of an extremely unique material. Even with Jianqin's eyesight, he was unable to tell whether it was made of stone or iron. Apart from being extremely heavy, the white stone was extremely tough as well. Afterward, Jianqin mobilized a saint force and slowly infused it into the white stone through his arm. However, as soon as the saint force came in contact with the surface of the white stone, it seemed to have encountered a sturdy fortress, unable to advance any further. The density of the white stone was extremely great. Even Jianqin's saint force was unable to penetrate it. Jianqin finally moved his gaze away from the white stone and looked at the stall owner. "May I ask what kind of stone this is and what its uses are?" Hearing this, the stall owner chuckled and said a little embarrassedly, "Little brother, to be honest, I don't know what this strange stone is, and I don't know what its uses are either. However, it is extremely heavy. Just from this point alone, I can conclude that this stone is definitely not ordinary." "Then where did you obtain this stone?" Jianqin continued to ask as he stared at the stall owner with shining eyes. Hearing this, the stall owner frowned slightly. After thinking for a while, he said, "Little brother, many people have asked me this before, but I never told them. Today, I've found you pleasing to the eye, so I'll tell you." Speaking to this point, the stall owner paused and pointed at the white stone, continuing, To be honest, I actually found the stone in the magical Beast Mountain range. Oh, hearing this, Jian Chen's gaze once again landed on the white rock. He wasn't surprised that the stall owner had picked up this white rock in the mountain range of magical beasts. After all, everyone had their own opportunities. Even a farmer could dig up gold and treasure from the ground. Seeing that Jian Chen seemed to be very interested in the white stone, the stall owner said again, "Little brother, this white stone has been with me for many years now. If it weren't for the fact that I urgently need money right now, I wouldn't be selling it. I can see that you are very interested in the stone, so why don't you buy it?" Chapter 108. This. The stall owner looked at Gentian's face and hesitated slightly. Although the stall owner knew that the strange stone was definitely something special, he really did not know what it was used for. In order to understand the origins of the stone, he had looked through a few books regarding rare treasures, but he still failed to find an answer. He had even asked many of his good friends, but they were all for naught. After thinking about it again and again, he finally made up his mind to sell the stone. It was just a pity that basically no one on the Tianyuan continent knew the use of the strange stone. Although there were many people who were curious about the stone in the few months he had set up the stall and wanted to buy it, all of them immediately put down the stone and left when they heard the price. This was because the stall owner knew that the stone was definitely something special. Even though he did not know what it was used for, he still wanted to sell it for a good price. As a result, many people gave up on buying the stone without any hesitation when they heard the price. The stall owner was undecided when Jianchen asked about the price of the stone. He really did need a large sum of money right now. It could be said that the stone was the only thing on him that could earn him a certain amount of money. If the price was too high, he was worried that Jianchen would immediately put down the stone and leave like everyone else. If the price was too low, the stall owner would be unwilling to give up. As a result, the stall owner was conflicted when Jianchen asked about the price. He had no idea what price to change. After hesitating for quite a while, the stall owner finally said, "Brother, if you've really taken an interest in this strange stone, just name a price." Jianchen stared at the stall owner with interest. He gently smiled. "You should be the one selling the item. Logically speaking, you should be the one to name the price. Why do I have to name the price?" The stall owner became slightly embarrassed when he heard that. He bitterly smiled. "Brother, it's not that I don't want to name the price, but I'm afraid that I'll scare you once I name the price. There have been many people who were interested in this stone in the past, but as soon as they heard the price, they didn't even discuss it. They just put down the stone and left." "Oh, then how much do you think this stone is worth?" Jianchen became interested and asked. In his heart, he had already made up his mind to buy the stone. Although he didn't know what the white stone was for, it was definitely something extraordinary, since it could cause the 2 specks of light in his dantian to react strangely. Perhaps the stone could even resolve the 2 specks of light in his dantian. Therefore, Jianchen was determined to get the stone. The stall owner looked at Jianchen's expression, then clenched his teeth and said, "Brother, if you're really interested in this stone, I'll sell it to you at a cheaper price. What do you think about this price?" As he spoke, the stall owner stretched out his hand and waved it in front of him. Seeing the stall owner's actions, Jianchen's eyes revealed a trace of ridicule. He then said in an uncertain tone, "Could it be 50 gold coins?" Hearing this, the stall owner's face turned red. The price that Jianchen named was worlds apart from the price that he had in mind. The stall owner sighed helplessly and said, "Brother, I won't beat around the bush with you. Let's be frank. I'm selling this stone for 500 purple coins. Do you want it?" As he spoke, the stall owner stared at Jianchen. "What? 500 purple coins? Are you kidding me?" Jianchen exclaimed in a low voice. He stared at the stall owner in disbelief, especially the 3 words purple coins. Jianchen especially emphasized it. 500 purple coins was equivalent to 50,000 gold coins. The stall owner's face turned slightly red. From Jianshin's expression, the stall owner understood that he couldn't sell the stone for 500 purple coins. This, brother, I think you should name a price. If the price is acceptable to me, I can sell it to you. The stall owner said bitterly. Jianshin sucked in a deep breath when he heard that. Afterwards, he studied the strange, white rock in his hand again. He became hesitant. After a while, Jianshin seemed to have finally made up his mind. He said, I'll give you 100 purple coins at most. It's up to you whether you want to sell it or not. As he spoke, Jianshin stared at the stall owner. In his heart, he was also nervous. Although Jianshin was determined to get this stone, it would be best if he could buy it at a cheap price. Moreover, 100 purple coins was not a small sum for a small mercenary like the stall owner. Moreover, Jianshin could tell that the stall owner, who was only in his 30s, was a smart person. He definitely could not show that he was determined to get the stone. Once the stall owner saw through it, no one could guarantee that the stall owner would not ask for a sky-high price. Moreover, there was another reason. Jianshin could not reveal that he possessed too much money. Otherwise, there would be quite a few people who would come looking for trouble on the treacherous Tianyuan continent. Although Jianshin did not fear Saint Masters with his current strength, it was still best to avoid trouble like this as much as possible. Hearing that Jianshin was willing to pay 100 purple coins for the stone, the stall owner's eyes immediately filled with joy. However, he quickly hid it and pretended to be troubled. He muttered, Brother, do you think you can add a point? Jianshin faintly smiled and gently shook his head. Jianshin could clearly see the joy in the stall owner's eyes. Seeing that Jianshin was not willing to increase the price, the stall owner's eyes filled with disappointment. He clenched his teeth and thought about it. In the end, he firmly nodded his head. All right, 100 purple coins it is. Deal. Afterwards, Jianshin directly pulled out a large amount of purple coins from his space belt. He counted 100 of them and directly tossed them to the stall owner. At the same time, he placed the strange white stone into his own space belt and immediately left. Although Jianshin really wanted to study the use of the strange white stone, it was clearly not a good place to do so in a crowded street. However, as soon as Jianshin left, two people immediately noticed him. The two of them were young men in their 20s, and they were skinny. Lil 3, looks like we've come across a fat sheep today. The skinny young man on the left stared in the direction Jianshin had left in. He spoke in a low voice with a hint of excitement in his voice. Chapter 109. Jianshin continued to stroll along the street. Since he had successfully bought this strange white stone, Jianshin was no longer in a hurry to study what was so special about this white stone. Instead, he continued to stroll along the street to see if there was any chance of encountering another treasure. However, there was one thing that Jianshin found strange. Ever since he bought the white stone, the two light spots in his dantian had calmed down once again and did not cause the slightest ripple. Jianshin did not intend to care about such a matter now. He could only wait until he had time at night to take out the white stone and study it. He wanted to see if he could use the white stone as a breakthrough point to find a solution to the problem of the two light spots in his dantian. Once the problem of the two light spots was solved, Jianshin's cultivation would undoubtedly be much smoother. Although the existence of the two light spots allowed Jianshin to absorb the energy from the demon cores and cultivate 3 times faster than usual, and could also help Jianshin solve the problem of the violent elements in the demon cores. However, the consumption of the demon cores was too great. It was so great that Jianshin was worried about his future cultivation path. If it was possible, Jianshin would rather his cultivation speed return to how it was before and solve the violent elements in the demon cores by himself. He did not want to have an uncontrollable variable in his dantian. After all, in Jianshin's opinion, the purple and green light spots were a ticking time bomb that could explode at any time. Although his cultivation speed would be much slower in this way, at least he would not have to worry about the demon cores all day long. Moreover, even without the demon cores, He could completely rely on absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to cultivate. Moreover, with the removal of the 2 light spots in his dantian, even if Genshin absorbed the energy from the demon cores to cultivate, the consumption of the demon cores would be reduced by a lot. A rank 3 demon core was enough to support him for several days, or even more than 10 days of consumption. In this way, if Genshin spent a day hunting demon cores, it would be enough for him to cultivate for several months. With the reduction of the time spent hunting demon cores, Genshin would have more time to spend on cultivation. In this way, even if the purple and green light spots in his dantian were removed, it would not have much impact on Genshin's overall cultivation speed. Genshin strolled aimlessly on the street, his eyes constantly looking at the stalls on both sides of the street. He even occasionally went into some shops to take a look. The occurrence of the strange white stone had undoubtedly given Genshin a wake-up call. Therefore, Genshin was now strolling on the street with the intention of finding treasures. He wanted to see if he could find any strange things or things that he was interested in, or if he encountered something that could cause the 2 light spots in his dantian to act abnormally. Unfortunately, after strolling along the way, Genshin was greatly disappointed. There was no harvest at all. It seems that these things can only be found by chance. Genshin let out a helpless sigh. Looking at the sky and seeing that it was getting late, he lost the mood to continue strolling. Genshin glanced behind him, the trace of a cold smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. He muttered in a low voice, "It's getting late. After dealing with those people behind me, I should find a restaurant to rest. Tomorrow morning, I still have to go to the mountain range of magical beasts with everyone." As he spoke, Genshin looked around and found a street with fewer people to pass through. After that, Genshin continued to pass through the streets. His pace wasn't fast, as if he was casually strolling along the street. However, the roads he took were all relatively remote and less populated. After passing through a few more secluded alleys, Genshin finally arrived at a secluded alley. At the end of the alley was a wall over 4 meters tall. This was actually a dead end. Genshin stopped and stretched his body. He then turned around to look at the secluded alley behind him. A trace of a cold smile of disdain appeared on his face as he said in a flat tone, "Friend, you followed me for so long. Don't tell me you don't dare to come out and meet me?" Not long after Genshin finished speaking, a group of people suddenly surged out from the originally secluded alley. There were over 10 of them, all around the age of 20 or 30. The oldest one looked to be nearing 40. As soon as these people appeared, they immediately spread out and blocked the only exit of this small alley. Obviously, they didn't want Genshin to leave from this only exit. Then, these people maintained their formation and slowly walked towards Genshin. Every one of them stared at Genshin with a fierce look on their faces. Genshin still had a smile on his face as he watched these people slowly walk towards him. It was as if he didn't see their fierce looks at all. With his eyesight and the help of his powerful god, he could clearly see the strength of these people. Among them, the weakest was actually not even a saint. There were also 3 great saints. What surprised Genshin the most was that the one who looked the oldest among them actually had the strength of a saint master. Moreover, he was a level higher than the leader of the Raging Flame Perpetual Guest Group Kendall. He was a mid-level saint master. This person was a middle-aged man around the age of 40. He wore a green robe and had a fierce look on his face. He had short hair that was an inch long on his head. There was a large beard on both sides of his lips and under his chin. "Gentlemen, you have followed me for so long. May I know what you want?" Genshin still had a smile on his face as he asked in a flat tone. The oldest middle-aged man with the strength of a mid-level Saint Master stared fiercely at Genshin and said in a deep voice, "So you discovered us long ago." Genshin slowly crossed his arms in front of his chest and said with a smile, "Of course. You guys have followed me so openly and for so long. It's hard not to be discovered." Hearing this, the The middle-aged man with the strength of a mid-level Saint Master revealed a look of realization and said, "So that's how it is. We were too careless." Speaking up to here, the middle-aged man's expression suddenly changed. He stared at Genshin with a pair of sharp eyes and said in a deep voice, "Brat, the only exit of this path has been sealed by us. If you don't want to die, immediately throw your spatial belt and all the valuables on you to me. Otherwise, you can prepare to lie here forever. If you want the things on me, it depends on whether you have the strength to take them." Although Genshin's tone was flat, the coldness contained within could be clearly heard by anyone. Hearing this, the middle-aged man didn't waste any more words. He waved his hand and shouted, "Everyone go! Take him down, and everything on him will be ours." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the dozen or so people around him immediately charged at Genshin. Saint weapons appeared in their hands at the same time. Among them, there were a few people who hadn't reached the Saint realm, but they also held iron rods and iron machetes in their hands and charged at Genshin without any fear. Seeing the dozen or so people charging at him, Genshin sneered. When the dozen or so people were less than 10 meters away from him, Genshin gently leapt up and flew into the air like a swallow. His feet kicked off the walls on both sides of the alley, and he leapt over the dozen or so people's heads, heading straight for the middle-aged man. At the same time, a silver-white sword suddenly appeared in his right hand. It turned into a silver-white bolt of lightning in the air, stabbing towards the middle-aged man's throat at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye. As his strength continued to increase, Genshin's body had been tempered by Saint Force through a special method, causing his body to become much stronger than before. With the strengthening of his body and the increase of Saint Force, Genshin's sword was much faster than before. This ordinary sword strike was so fast that even great saints would find it difficult to block it. After all, in order to increase the speed of an attack, not only did it require a large amount of Saint Force, it also required an extremely strict requirement on the body. As a result, not only was Genshin's swift sword unbreakable in the Jianghu of his previous life, even on the Tianyuan continent, unless it was someone who was much stronger than him, no one on the same level as Genshin would be able to block his swift sword. If Genshin used his full strength, people of the same level as him would not even have the chance to react before their throats were slit. Seeing Genshin's menacing sword strike, the middle-aged man sneered. A machete that was half a person's height suddenly appeared in his right hand. The middle-aged man gripped the machete with both hands as powerful Saint Force circulated around it. With a roar, he swung the machete at Genshin's sword. Ding! When the light wind sword and the middle-aged man's machete collided, the sound of metal clashing rang out. When the two Saint weapons collided, the resulting shockwave actually caused the middle-aged man to take a step back. He then looked at Genshin with a look of shock and disbelief. This was because the middle-aged man did not put Genshin in his eyes at all. In his eyes, Genshin was at most in his 20s and only had the strength of a saint. No matter how much of a genius he would at most have just entered the great saint realm. To a team like him, Genshin was not a threat at all. But after this exchange, the middle-aged man was shocked to discover that even though he thought highly of Genshin's strength was still far from what he had expected. Even when compared to him, the middle-aged man was not much weaker.